Talia Mercer's manicured fingers closed around emerald silk and pulled. The sound of tearing fabric cut through the cold Manhattan night like a slap. Imani Crosswell stumbled, her golden clutch shattering across the marble terrace, lipstick rolling toward the edge 40 stories above the city. Talia raised her phone, aimed it directly at Imani's face, and smiled. "Get it all," Preston said. "Every single second." They were still laughing when the terrace door opened behind them. They didn't hear it. They were too busy watching Imani on the ground, waiting for her to cry, to beg, to give them exactly what they came out here for. They never saw him coming. If you've ever been in a room where someone looked straight through you, like you weren't worth the air you were breathing, then this story is for you. Stay until the very end, because what happens next changes everything. And if this is your first time here, subscribe right now, hit that bell, drop a like, and tell me in the comments what city or country you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. Let's begin. The elevator doors opened on the 40th floor, and Imani Crosswell already knew tonight was going to be a performance. Not the kind she gave her clients when she walked into a cold, expensive room and transformed it into something that made people feel things they couldn't name. That kind of performance came naturally to her. She'd been doing it since she was 22 years old, hauling fabric swatches on the train across Atlanta because she couldn't afford a car, pitching ideas to people who looked at her like she'd walked into the wrong building. No. Tonight's performance was the other kind. The kind where she walked into a room full of strangers who would look at her, her size, her skin, her face, and decide who she was before she ever opened her mouth. She'd been doing that performance her whole life, too. The party was already at full tilt when she stepped out. Manhattan rooftop, amber lighting, the kind of crowd where every conversation was a negotiation and every laugh was calculated. Imani recognized the signs immediately. The careful placement of people, the way certain guests moved in slow, deliberate orbits around the ones with real money. She'd designed spaces for people like this. She understood the architecture of their world better than most of them did. She looked good. She knew that. The emerald gown had cost her 3 weeks of deliberation. And one very patient seamstress named Donna, who worked out of a shop in Harlem and had hands that could turn fabric into something sacred. Color was intentional. Emerald because it was bold. Emerald because it refused to disappear. Imani did not do disappearing. She pulled 2 glasses of champagne from a passing tray, turned, and scanned the room for her husband. She found him the same way she always found him in a crowd, not by looking for his face, but by watching where other people's eyes went when they thought no one was watching them. Ronan Veyne had that effect. He didn't have to raise his voice, or cross his arms, or do anything that looked like a threat. He simply existed in a room, and the room reorganized itself around him, quietly, like water finding the path of least resistance. He was standing near the far wall, deep in conversation with a man Imani didn't recognize. Dark suit, silver cufflinks, the kind of posture that came from decades of having other people adjust to you, rather than the other way around. Ronan's hand was in his pocket. His expression was neutral, but Imani had been married to him for 4 years, and she could read the difference between his neutral and his actually fine. This was not actually fine. She started toward him. But someone touched her elbow. Imani Crosswell. The voice belonged to a woman named Claudette, a socialite whose penthouse on the Upper West Side, Imani, had redesigned 18 months ago. 3 weeks of Imani's life had gone into that living room. The woman had cried when she saw it finished. Now she was standing here with a glass of white wine and the slightly too bright smile of someone who wanted something. "You look extraordinary," Claudette said. "Thank you." Imani meant it as a door closing, but Claudette walked right through it. "I have a friend, her name is Petra. She just bought a place in Tribeca. Absolutely destroyed the original bones of it. The previous owners had no idea what they were doing. Send me an email," Imani said gently. "My assistant handles the initial consultations." Of course. Claudette touched her arm again. "But I told her you'd be here tonight, and she's dying to just say hello, maybe a quick introductions." Claudette. Imani kept her voice warm enough to soften the no without changing it. "Tonight is personal for me. Email my office Monday. We'll take care of her." She left Claudette mid-sentence. Not rudely, but clearly. Across the room, she caught Ronan's eye. Something passed between them, the kind of shorthand that took years to develop between two people. She lifted her chin slightly. A question. He shook his head, equally slight. Not now. Later. Later. That word had been doing a lot of heavy lifting in their marriage recently. Imani took a sip of champagne and chose not to chase that thought all the way down. Not here. Not tonight. She circulated instead, the way she knew how to, saying the right things to the right people, and meaning very little of it, because this was what tonight required of her. She was good at this. She had paid for that skill with years of walking into rooms that didn't want her and figuring out how to make them forget they'd ever felt that way. The terrace caught her eye around 9:30. It was quieter out there. The glass doors were cracked open, and the night air coming through had that clean, slightly biting quality that Manhattan got in early fall. Cold enough to be honest, not cold enough to be cruel. Imani was tired in a specific way that had nothing to do with sleep. The kind of tired you get from being on for too long. From presenting yourself perfectly in a space that never asked whether you were comfortable. She told herself she'd just take 10 minutes. Just 10 minutes outside, by herself, with the city spread out below her like a promise she wasn't sure anyone was keeping anymore. She set her champagne glass on the bar and slipped through the terrace door. The view was worth it. Manhattan at night, from 40 stories up, had this quality that she'd tried to describe to Donna once while she was being fitted for this exact dress. And Donna had nodded patiently and said, "Baby, just say it's beautiful and stop trying to architect everything." Donna was not wrong. Imani leaned on the railing, not close enough to make anyone nervous, far enough from the glass doors to feel properly alone. Below, the city moved. Cabs, cyclists, a couple arguing on a corner, their arms gesturing big. And even from up here, Imani could tell it wasn't the bad kind of argument. It was the kind where both people still cared enough to fight. She thought about Ronan. She thought about the way he'd looked tonight before they left the apartment. He'd been distracted in a way he was trying to hide, which meant he was either afraid of something or ashamed of something. And in 4 years of marriage, she had learned that with Ronan, those two emotions were almost always the same thing. He hadn't told her what was wrong. He'd kissed her forehead, called her beautiful, and told her they'd talk later. Later again. She was pressing her thumbnail into the edge of the railing, not hard enough to hurt, just enough to feel something sharp and specific when the terrace door opened behind her. She didn't turn around immediately. She assumed it was a waiter, or someone else needing a few minutes of air. Then she heard the laughter. It was the particular kind of laughter that arrives with an audience already built in. 3 people at least. And already too loud, already performative. The way people laugh when the joke isn't about something funny, but about someone's discomfort. Imani turned. There were 3 of them. She didn't know their names yet. She would learn them later, the kind of learning that comes from consequences. But in that moment, she saw them the way you see any threat. In general outline first, details second. The woman was tall, blonde, wearing something white, and sharply cut. She had the kind of face that had probably been very attractive before it decided it didn't need to be warm. Her mouth was already curving into the shape of something mean. The 2 men flanking her were both in their 40s, the kind of men who had turned their money into a personality. They were already looking at Imani the way certain people look at a thing they've decided isn't quite real. The blonde woman said, as if something had confirmed a suspicion. "I thought I saw someone come out here." Imani looked at her, said nothing. "I didn't realize the event had expanded its guest list." One of the men made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. The other was already looking at his phone. Imani had been here before. Not on this exact terrace, not with these exact people, but in this exact moment, this specific 3-second window between when she understood what was coming and when it actually arrived. She had stood in this window 100 times. In her clients' living rooms, when the husband arrived home and looked through her to speak to the white contractor. In the lobby of her own firm, when a new client assumed she was the assistant. In restaurants, in meetings, in galleries, in every single room that had ever looked at her and decided she was in the wrong place. The window always lasted exactly 3 seconds. She used them to make a decision. "Nice view," Imani said pleasantly, and turned back to the city. That was what she chose. Every time, in every room, she chose not to give them the version of herself they were trying to produce. The angry version. The defensive version. The version that would confirm everything they already thought they knew about who she was. She heard the woman's heels on the marble. You design things, don't you? The voice came from closer now, over her left shoulder. Interiors, I think someone said. Imani kept her eyes on Manhattan. I do. A pause engineered to sound like judgment. I'm sure there's a market for that. Different demographics, and so on. Different demographics. The phrase was chosen carefully, the way a scalpel is chosen over a hammer for precision, for plausible deniability. It meant people like you, for people like you. It meant, you don't belong in my tier. Imani's jaw tightened. Just once. Just for a second. She didn't turn around. I've had good work, she said. I'm sure. The woman Talia, though Imani still didn't know that, moved again. Now she was to Imani's right. Flanking. It must be such a challenge. In this street. Given. Another practice pause. Everything. Given everything. Given your size. Given your skin. Given the fact that you are standing here instead of knowing your place. I manage, Imani said. One of the men laughed. The real kind, brief and ugly. The kind that falls out before you can catch it. Imani set her champagne glass down on the railing ledge. Carefully. Her hands were steady. She had trained her hands to be steady in rooms like this one. You know what? She said, and finally turned to face them. I think I'm going to head back inside. She said it pleasantly. She looked at all three of them. Once, the way she might look at a piece of furniture she'd decided wasn't working in a space. Not with anger. Just with the quiet assessment of someone who has already moved on. She turned toward the door. That was when Talia's hand shot out and grabbed the back of her gown. Not the edge. Not a sleeve. The back panel, the silk that Donna had spent 2 nights getting right. The seam that was meant to suggest structure without constraint. Talia grabbed it the way you grab something you've already decided you own. And she pulled. The sound was catastrophic. That's the only word for it. The tearing of silk in the cold night air was a sound that went through Imani's teeth and down her spine and landed somewhere in the oldest part of her, part that had sat in classrooms at 9 years old, listening to other children explain to her what she was. The force of it spun her. Her heel caught the marble wrong. Her golden clutch, the one she'd borrowed from her friend Kezia, because it was perfect, and she was going to have to explain, that went flying, hit the terrace floor, cracked open, and scattered lip gloss and a business card holder in a half circle around her feet. Imani hit the railing with both hands, caught herself. She wasn't on the ground, but she wasn't steady either. Preston, she would learned his name in approximately 14 minutes, was laughing hard enough that he had to brace one hand on the glass door. Gavin, she would learn as in 15, was already filming on his phone, the camera trained on her face. And Talia raised her own phone. Stay right there, Talia said, and her voice had changed. Careful cruelty was gone. What was underneath was rawer, simpler. Stay right there, that's perfect. Imani looked down at the torn fabric hanging from her side, at Donna's work, undone in 3 seconds, at her scattered belongings on the marble, and something happened in her that wasn't rage and wasn't grief and wasn't fear. It was something quieter than all of those things. It was the same thing that had happened when she was 9 years old, and a boy named Darius told the whole class that her dress was too small, and everyone had laughed. It was what had happened at 24 when a senior partner at her first firm had told her, carefully and with great professional gentleness, that clients in her market segment sometimes felt more comfortable working with someone they could relate to. It was what had happened at 30 when she'd overheard a client's wife say, why did Marcus hire the big girl to someone in the next room? Each time, the same thing had happened inside her. Not a breaking, not a hardening, a clarifying. The world got very simple in those moments, very clear. The noise fell away, and what was left was just Imani, in her body, in her skin, in the space she occupied, and the plain and unglamorous truth that she was here. She had always been here. She would not be removed, straightened. The torn fabric hung, and she let it hang. She did not scramble for it. She did not try to cover herself. She stood up in her full height, which was not particularly tall, which had never particularly mattered, and she looked directly into Talia's camera. Not at Talia, at the camera, because there would be people watching this later, and she would not give them a face that asked for mercy. You finished? Imani said. Her voice came out so steady, it surprised even her. Talia blinked. The phone faltered for just a half second. Behind her, Preston's laughter tapered. Gavin's camera lowered slightly, not out of guilt but confusion. "'Cause I'm going back inside," Imani said, "and I want to make sure you got a good shot." She reached down deliberately, without hurrying, and gathered her business card holder from the floor. She picked up the lip gloss. She collected the clasp from her broken clutch and held all of it in one hand. She looked at Talia one more time. "You can do whatever you want with that footage," she said. "I promise you it won't change anything." She turned toward the door. She was 3 feet from it when her phone buzzed, in the small, hidden pocket of the ruined gown. She didn't reach for it. Not yet. She was 5 seconds from being inside and away from them, when the terrace door opened from the other side, and Ronan Veyne stepped out. He took in the scene in the way he took in everything, silently, completely, with an attention so total that it felt physical. His eyes moved from Imani to the torn gown, to the scattered contents of her clutch, to the 3 people behind her, to the phone, still half raised in Talia's hand. It took him maybe 4 seconds. His expression did not change. That was the thing people always misunderstood about Ronan. They expected anger to look like raised voices, or clenched jaws, or the visible working of some internal mechanism toward explosion. That was not how Ronan's anger worked. When Ronan was truly angry, everything got quieter. His face did less. His body did less. The energy that other men spent on performance, he spent on absolute stillness. He walked past Talia without looking at her. He walked past Preston and Gavin without acknowledging their existence. He came to Imani and, without a word, slid his jacket from his shoulders and placed it around hers. He did it with the same careful attention he used for everything, making sure the collar sat right, making sure her arms were covered, making sure she was warm. Then he looked at her face for a long moment, not asking if she was okay. He knew she was not going to say she wasn't okay. He was checking something else. Whether she needed him to do anything right now. Whether she needed him to wait. She held his gaze. She shook her head very slightly. He nodded. Then and only then did he turn around. And for the first time since stepping onto the terrace, Ronan Veyne looked at Talia Mercer, Preston Cade, and Gavin Rusk. "I know you," he said. Not a greeting. An announcement. "I know your names," he said. And somehow the way he said it quiet, almost gentle, was so much worse than a shout would have been. All 3 of them. The laughter was completely gone now. The phones were down. Gavin had taken a step back, not consciously, just the way a body moves when some ancient alarm goes off in the brainstem that has nothing to do with rational thought. "We were just Preston started." "Don't," Ronan said. Preston stopped. And on the other side of the glass, through the amber-lit crowd, Imani could see faces turning their direction. People noticing. People sensing the specific gravity of a moment that was about to become something that could not be taken back. She looked at the 3 of them, Talia's phone still in her hand. Preston's easy smile collapsed. Gavin's camera now tucked behind his back, like a child hiding something they'd broken. And for one terrible, crystalline second, Imani felt it, the pull. Pull toward watching this go exactly as badly as it could go. Pull toward standing back while Ronan did what Ronan was capable of doing. The pull toward thinking they deserve it. They deserve whatever comes next. She understood that pull. She did not trust it. Because Imani had spent 33 years understanding the difference between justice and the particular relief of watching someone else suffer. She had grown up in a world that wanted her to confuse the two. She had refused. What happened next, she had not planned. But she had been carrying the words for a very long time. She turned back to the glass door and placed her palm flat on it. And then she stopped. And she turned around one more time. "You want to know why you did this tonight?" she said. Talia looked at her. "Not because of me specifically," Imani said. "I was just the one who was here. I was just the one who was alone for 10 minutes and happened to be the wrong size and the wrong color in the wrong room." She wasn't shouting. She was almost conversational. That, too, was a choice. I've been that person my whole life. And I'm going to tell you something. She looked at all 3 of them in turn. Every time someone did this to me in school, in meetings, in my own clients' homes, I used it. Every single time. Because the only thing that kept me going was proving that none of you got to determine the size of my life. She pushed the door open. You should have thought about that before you picked the Mafia boss's wife. She walked inside. The crowd parted for her. Not because they knew what had just happened. Most of them didn't. Not yet. But she walked with the particular energy of someone who had survived something and refused to look diminished by it, and people moved for that energy without understanding why. At the far side of the room, she found a quiet corner and stood with her back to the wall. Her hands were shaking, just slightly. She pressed them flat against the sides of Ronan's jacket. 3 people. She had been alone for 10 minutes, and 3 people had decided to dismantle her. And she had not cried, had not run, had not given them a single frame of footage that showed her as anything other than exactly who she was. But her hands were still shaking. Her phone buzzed again. This time, she reached for it. The message was from a number she didn't recognize. No name, no explanation, just a photograph. Her own face, captured in grainy surveillance quality, standing at the window of their apartment this morning in her bathrobe, time-stamped, taken from outside, from a distance that meant someone had been very deliberately positioned to take it. Imani stared at the photograph for a long time. Then she looked across the room, through the amber crowd and the careful laughter and the performance of wealth and belonging, to where Ronan was still on the terrace, still with his back to the glass, still looking at 3 people who had just now started to understand what they had stepped into. She thought about his face when he'd stepped onto that terrace, the way his expression had gone quiet and total. She thought about the word later and how many times she had let it stand between her and the truth. She thought about the fact that whoever had sent this photograph had wanted her to receive it tonight, in this place, in this specific state of damage and visibility. Her thumb hovered over Ronan's number. Then she put the phone back in the pocket of his jacket, because some things needed to be said face to face, and this was going to be one of them. The amber light inside the ballroom felt wrong after the cold of the terrace. Too warm, too performative, like walking into a room where everyone was pretending they hadn't just heard something break. Imani stood with her back against the wall, and Ronan's jacket pulled tight around her shoulders, and she counted her breaths the way Donna had taught her years ago during a particularly bad panic attack in a client's parking garage. 4 in. Hold 4. 4 out. It wasn't elegant and it wasn't always enough, but it gave her hands something to do besides shake. The photograph was still on her phone, her own face, her bathrobe. The window of their apartment on the 14th floor, which meant whoever took it was positioned somewhere high enough and close enough to capture her expression clearly. She had been drinking coffee, she remembered that. She'd been standing at the window, drinking coffee, and thinking about a sourcing issue with a Moroccan tile supplier, and completely unaware that someone was watching her do it. She looked at the photograph again. Timestamp, 7:42 a.m. this morning, which meant this had been in motion since before they left the apartment. Before the gown, before the emerald and the borrowed clutch, and Ronan's careful forehead kiss and his word later landing in the space between them like something dropped. She put the phone away. Across the room, through the amber crowd, she could see the terrace door still closed. Ronan hadn't come back in yet. She couldn't see through the glass from this angle bodies. In the way, the light wrong, and some part of her was grateful for that, because she wasn't ready to watch whatever was happening out there. And she wasn't ready to stop it either. And both of those things living in her at the same time were almost more than she could carry right now. A waiter appeared at her elbow with a tray of champagne. "No, thank you," she said. She said it so flatly that the waiter actually stepped back a half inch. She didn't apologize. She usually would have. Tonight she didn't have it in her. Her phone buzzed again. Not the unknown number. "Ronan. Are you inside?" She typed back. "Yes." 3 seconds. "Stay there. Don't talk to anyone." She stared at that message for a moment. Read it twice. The words were practical. They were the words of someone managing a situation, but underneath them, she felt the thing she always felt when Ronan operated in this mode. The particular loneliness of being protected by someone who hadn't told you what you were being protected from. She typed, "We need to talk tonight." His response took longer this time. Long enough that she watched the typing indicator appear and disappear twice. "I know. Just that." 2 words that confirmed he had been sitting on something, and that she had been right to feel it all evening, and that the talking they were going to do later was going to be the kind that rearranged things. She slid the phone back into the pocket of his jacket. Her thumb found a hard edge inside the pocket, something she hadn't put there. She reached in and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Not a note. A photograph, printed on plain paper, the kind of quality you'd get from a home printer running low on ink. She unfolded it. It was a picture of her. Not this morning. A different day. Different clothes, the camel coat she wore to the office. The one with the tortoiseshell buttons. She was coming out of her building, mid-stride, coffee in hand. Not looking at the camera, the shot was taken from across the street at an angle that suggested a telephoto lens, the kind of distance that meant whoever took it did not want to be seen. On the back of the photograph, in handwriting she didn't recognize, were 4 words. Soren. Imani held the paper very still. The ballroom noise continued around her ice, clicking against crystal, a woman laughing too loudly near the bar, someone's watch alarm going off and being silenced, and all of it felt like it was happening on the other side of a pane of glass. Ask him about Soren. She didn't know anyone named Soren. She was almost certain of that. She ran through her clients, her vendors, her contractors, the peripheral acquaintances that came with Ronan's world. Nothing. No Soren. But Ronan was not a man with a small world. She refolded the paper along its original crease and held it in her fist and stood there thinking about the specific weight of how many times in 4 years she had walked into a room and understood immediately that she was the only person in it who didn't have the complete information. She was so tired of being the last to know. The terrace door opened. Ronan came through it alone. Behind him, through the glass, she could see the 3 of them, still on the terrace, Talia, with her arms crossed, Preston standing very still with his phone in his hand, Gavin looking at the floor. Whatever Ronan had said to them, the effects were visible even from across the room. He found her immediately. He always did in crowds. It was one of the things she had loved about him. Early on, the way his eyes went to her, like she was a fixed point. It had felt like being chosen in those early days. Lately, she had started to wonder whether being a fixed point meant the same thing as being seen. He crossed the room toward her. People moved out of his path without being asked. He didn't look at them. He stopped in front of her. "You're okay," he said. It wasn't a question. He was confirming something he'd already assessed from across the room. "I'm not bleeding," she said. "That's different from okay." He looked at the torn gown. His jaw shifted, just slightly, the way it did when he was controlling something. "We should go." "Not yet." She opened her fist and held out the folded paper. "This was in your jacket pocket." He looked at it. Something moved through his face, fast, almost imperceptible. But she'd been studying that face for 4 years, and she caught it. Recognition. And beneath the recognition, something that looked very much like the specific alarm of a person who's been managing a secret and just watched it arrive somewhere they didn't intend. He took the paper, unfolded it, read it. His expression did not change. That was how she knew it was bad. "Who is Soren?" she said. "Not here." Ronamani, his voice was low, not harsh, but the kind of low that meant he was asking for something and wouldn't ask twice. "Not here. I promise we will talk tonight, but I need you to give me 20 minutes and not here." She looked at him for a long moment. His face, the controlled stillness she had once found so compelling and now sometimes found so exhausting. The dark eyes that were looking at her with something she couldn't fully name, not dishonesty, exactly. More like the expression of a man standing between 2 things and trying to shield her from the one behind him. 20 minutes, she said. He nodded. "I'm going to find Kezia," Imani said. "Her clutch is in pieces on the terrace. I need to tell her before she figures it out on her own. I'll have someone collect it. I'll tell her myself." She held his gaze. "That's also not negotiable." Something shifted in his face. Not softening exactly. More like a kind of recognition. He stepped aside. She walked toward the far end of the room where she'd last seen Kezia holding court near the string quartet, and she felt Ronan's eyes on her back the whole way, and she didn't turn around. Kezia Johnson was 41 years old, 5 feet 2 inches tall, and had the specific emotional intelligence of someone who had survived a great deal by reading rooms faster than the rooms could read her. She'd been Imani's closest friend for 11 years, since the week they were both seated at the table at a design industry dinner, and discovered they were the only 2 black women in attendance. which had led to a conversation that had lasted until the venue staff started stacking chairs around them. Kezia looked at Imani crossing the room toward her and stopped mid-sentence. The man she was talking to, a gallery owner named something forgettable, continued, speaking for approximately 4 words before he realized he'd lost his audience. Kezia crossed to Imani and took both of her hands. "What happened?" she said. "It wasn't a question either." "Your clutch is on the terrace," Imani said. "I'm sorry." Clasp broke when it fell. Kezia looked at the jacket around Imani's shoulders, looked at the tear in the gown visible below the jacket's hem, looked at Imani's face. "Honey," she said quietly, "I'm fine. You don't have to say that. I know." Imani squeezed her hands once and let go. "I'm also actually mostly fine. I want to be clear about that. No one put their hands on me in a way that I'm standing. I'm upright. I handled it. Ronan? He got there after." Kezia looked across the room toward where Ronan was now standing, with a man Imani didn't recognize, younger, sharp-suited, clearly agitated, speaking in fast, low bursts while Ronan listened with the specific patience of someone absorbing intelligence. His security chief. Imani had met him twice. Marcus, she thought. Or maybe Michael. "What is that about?" Kezia said. "I don't know yet." Imani paused. "Kez, do you know anyone named Soren? Victor Soren, maybe? Or just does that name mean anything to you?" Kezia thought about it. Genuinely considered it, her eyes going slightly unfocused the way they did when she was actually searching rather than performing the search. Then she shook her head. "Should it? I'm not sure. Is this connected to what just happened?" "I think everything tonight is connected. I just don't have the full picture yet." Kezia looked at her. The kind of look that said she had more questions. She had more questions than the situation was going to allow right now, and she was choosing to hold them rather than add to the weight Imani was already carrying. "The clutch can be replaced," Kezia said. "I'll get you a new one." "I don't need a new one. I need you to go handle whatever this is. And then call me at a reasonable hour tomorrow and tell me everything." Imani almost smiled. Almost. Reasonable hour is doing a lot of work in that sentence coming from you. "I consider 9 a.m. entirely reasonable. You've never voluntarily been awake at 9 a.m. in your adult life. I'll make an exception." Kezia touched her arm briefly, the way you touch someone when words have reached their limit. "Go." She found Ronan at the edge of the room, near the corridor that led to the private elevator bays. He was alone now. The security chief had gone. He was holding his phone and staring at something on the screen with the expression he usually reserved. For problems he was deciding whether to solve quietly or at all. When she reached him, he turned the phone toward her without speaking. She took it. On the screen was a security camera, still grainy, time-stamped from earlier that evening. The angle was the hotel's service corridor on this floor. In the frame, a man she didn't recognize, speaking to a hotel employee. The man was handing the employee something, and the employee was gesturing toward the room they were currently standing in. The unknown man's face was partially obscured, but the edge of his profile was visible. "That's from 40 minutes ago," Ronan said. "Someone was paying for access to this party." "Who is he? We don't have a full ID yet." Ronan paused. "But the man he's speaking to, the hotel employee, we've seen him before. He works for Victor Soren." Imani looked up from the phone. "Soren," she said. Ronan's eyes held hers. The party continued around them, music and laughter and the clink of expensive things, and he stood in the middle of it, looking at her with the face of a man who had arrived. Finally, at the moment he had been trying to delay. "Tell me," she said. "Not everything is safe to say here." "Then start with what is." He was quiet for 4 seconds. She counted them. "Victor Soren is my financial partner," he said. "Has been for 11 years. He manages the legitimate side of certain investments, real estate, development projects. He has access to our accounts." He paused. "Our personal accounts, Imani, not just the business." Process that, the specific shape of what it meant. "How long have you had reason to question him?" Another pause. "Longer, Ronan." "How long?" 6 weeks. The number landed in her chest like something dropped from a height. 6 weeks. 6 weeks of sleeping in the same bed and sitting across the same table and having the same conversations, and him carrying this. 6 weeks of later. 6 weeks, she said. She kept her voice very even. She was good at that. She had a lot of practice. "And you didn't tell me because I didn't want to frighten you until I was sure." "That's not a reason. That's a management strategy." Something flickered across his face. Not guilt, exactly. The more complicated cousin of guilt, the expression of someone who knows they made the wrong call, and also believes, at some level, that they made the only call they could make with who they are. I was trying to protect you, he said. I know you were. She handed his phone back to him. That's the problem. He took the phone. His hand closed around it, and he looked at her, and she looked back at him, and the distance between them in that moment was not measured in feet. It was measured in all the things that had been handled, instead of shared, managed, instead of discussed, absorbed by one person, so the other person wouldn't have to feel the weight. She was tired of not feeling the weight. The note in your pocket, she said. Someone put it there deliberately. Someone knew you'd take your jacket off and put it on me. She let that settle. Which means someone knew we'd be here tonight, knew what they were going to do to me on that terrace, and planned for your jacket to end up on my body. She watched him process that. Watched the moment he arrived at the same conclusion and what it cost him to let her see him arrive there. They weren't going after you specifically, he said. It came out slower than his usual speech. They were going after me through you, so I was bait. He didn't answer, which was its own answer. The music changed in the ballroom. Something slower, something with strings. A few couples moved toward the center of the room. Party, entirely unconcerned with the conversation happening at its margins, continued to be exactly what it was. Who knew we were coming tonight, she said. The invitation list was private. That's not what I asked. He held her gaze. A small number of people. My staff. Victor's office was aware because I had a meeting with him, scheduled for the morning after, and he asked where I'd be the night before. Imani was quiet for a moment. He asked where you'd be, she said. Yes. And you told him yes. She nodded once. Very slowly. The kind of nod that isn't agreement but acknowledgement of how a thing was built. Piece by a person who thought they were being careful. The three people on the terrace, she said. Preston, Gavin, and Talia. Do any of them have connections to Soren? Marcus is running that now. Do they? Potentially. Talia Mercer's former husband sat on a board with Soren. That's as far as we have it right now. So she wasn't random. Probably not. Imani thought about Talia on the terrace. Practiced quality of her cruelty, the careful vocabulary, the deniability built into phrases like different demographics and given everything. She had thought, at the time, that it was the cruelty of a certain kind of woman who had sharpened herself against other people her whole life. And maybe it was that too. But it was also something else. It was the cruelty of someone who had been pointed in a direction and given permission. She knew I'd be out there, Imani said. Someone told her you'd go to the terrace. Alone. Someone who knows my habits. Yes. Or someone who watched me all evening and communicated it to her. Ronan looked at her. That's also possible. The cold of it settled into her. Not the terrace cold that was gone, replaced by the ballroom's careful warmth. This was the cold that came from understanding that something you thought was ambient and random was actually targeted and deliberate. That the terrace had not been where she went to escape the performance. It had been where someone needed her to go. I need you to show me the photographs, she said. He was very still. The ones you received, she said. Threat. Whatever arrived before tonight that you didn't tell me about. Imani Ronan. She said his name with the full weight of 4 years behind it. I am standing in a torn transient yard jacket at a party where someone used me as a weapon to get to you, and I received a photograph of my own face on my own phone from an unknown number, and I found a note in your jacket written by someone who wanted me to ask you about your financial partner. And I am telling you right now that if you say not here or later to me one more time tonight, I will not be in a place to have this conversation in a way that ends well for our marriage. She did not raise her voice. She didn't need to. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached into the interior pocket of his jacket, the one she was wearing, and she stepped back slightly so he could reach in. He withdrew a folded envelope. He hadn't taken it out before he put the jacket on her. It had been there the whole time. He held it out. She opened it. There were 4 photographs inside, printed on the same low-quality paper as the one she'd found. All surveillance shots. All of her. The coffee window shot from this morning. A second one, outside the building. Same day as the camel coat photograph, clearer this time, her face fully visible. A third, her coming out of her firm's offices, a Tuesday, She could tell by the coffee cup from the place on the corner that was only open weekdays. A fourth, inside her car, taken through the passenger window at a stoplight, her face illuminated by her phone screen. All recent, all deliberate, all intimate in the way that surveillance photography was always intimate. The violation of it was not just the watching, but the recording, the saving the decision that her existence was something to be catalogued. On the back of the fourth photograph, the same handwriting as the note, "She is the only thing you won't protect yourself from." Imani stared at that sentence for a long time. She is the only thing you won't protect yourself from. It was written as a threat, she understood that. It was meant to tell Ronan that whoever held these photographs held a lever over him. But there was something else in it too, an accuracy that was its own kind of violence. Whoever wrote it understood the specific architecture of Ronan Veyne, that a man who had built a world around controlling every variable had a single point of genuine vulnerability. And that point was love, unmanaged and unstrategic, which was the only kind Imani had ever been willing to accept from him. She refolded the photographs and placed them back in the envelope. "He's been watching me for at least 3 weeks," she said. "Yes, and you've known for 6. The photographs arrived 4 weeks ago. Before that, there were other signals, financial irregularities, conversations that felt wrong in retrospect. You should have told me at the financial irregularities. I know. You don't get to make unilateral decisions about what information I'm entitled to when the information is about my own safety. I know." The word again. Flat and honest and carrying no defensiveness, which in a strange way made it harder to be angry at than defensiveness would have been. He knew. He had known while he was doing it. He had made the choice anyway, and the choice had been wrong. And here they were. "There's a camera somewhere in this room," Imani said. "Recording right now. That's what Marcus came to tell you." It wasn't a question. She had watched the security chief's body language across the room. The tight, contained urgency of someone delivering information that required immediate action but could not be delivered at volume. Ronan looked at her. "Yes. And Victor Soren's people put it there. That's what we believe. So this whole party for Soren is about capturing footage of you doing something that can be used against you. Footage of me losing control," Ronan said. "In a public setting, in front of witnesses. The kind of footage that ends careers, ends freedom, ends..." He stopped. Started again. "If I retaliate against those 3 people tonight, the way every instinct I have is telling me to retaliate, Victor gets exactly what he needs." Imani looked at the terrace. Through the glass, she could see that the 3 of them had come back inside. Talia was at the bar, not looking in their direction, but with the body language of someone who was very deliberately not looking. Preston was on his phone. Gavin was speaking to a woman Imani didn't recognize. Ordinary looking. That was what made it monstrous. They looked like ordinary guests at an ordinary party, because for them, whatever Soren had offered them, whatever they'd been paid or promised, this had probably also felt ordinary. An easy job, find the wife. Be cruel in a way that's deniable. Get the husband to react. They had not known what they were walking into any more than she had. "He chose them because they're the type," Imani said. "The type that would do it. The type that would think I was an appropriate target. He didn't have to convince them of much." Ronan looked at her. "Probably not. Which makes them both instruments and culpable." She paused. "I'm not letting them off the hook because someone pointed them at me. They still chose to pull. No one's letting anyone off anything." "Good." She turned to look at him directly. "But you are also not going to handle this tonight in a way that gives Soren what he came here for." Imani Ronan. Same weight as before, same 4 years. "You just told me the whole point of tonight was to make you react violently in a recorded space. The camera is still running. Whatever Soren expected you to do, don't do it. That's all I'm asking right now. Just don't." He looked at her for a long-held moment. She could see the effort it cost him. Not the performance of effort, but the actual metabolic work of a man over something that had been his primary operating system for decades. Ronan Veyne had survived and succeeded in his world by being the person who responded to threats in ways that other people remembered. His reputation was built on that response. His safety, and therefore hers, was built on it. To not respond felt to him, she understood, like disarmament. Like choosing to bleed when you have the option to cauterize. "There's another way to end Soren," she said quietly. One he won't see coming because it doesn't look like what he expects from you. You don't know the full extent of. I know enough. She reached up and straightened the collar of his jacket around her shoulders. Not gently, just precisely. You kept me from the information. But you couldn't keep me from being in the middle of it anyway. So now I'm in the middle of it, and I'm telling you that we do this my way tonight. Soren gets nothing. We walk out of here with our heads up. And then tomorrow, when the cameras are off and the witnesses are gone, we figure out how to take him apart at the foundation. Ronan was very quiet. You're the one who always says the best revenge doesn't look like revenge, she said. I say that about other people's problems. It applies to yours too. He looked at her. Something in his face shifted, not opened. Exactly. But cracked. Just at the edge, the away a wall, doesn't fall all at once, but shows you the first place it's going to give way. I had Marcus pull Soren's financial records 6 weeks ago, he said. Full audit. Everything. Things Victor doesn't know I can access. He paused. It's significant, Imani. What's there? It's the kind of thing that doesn't go away. So we use it, she said. When we're ready. When it's our choice. He's not going to wait indefinitely. He's also not going to get what he came here for tonight. She held his gaze. Agreed? He was quiet for one more second. Agreed, he said. And then his phone rang. Not the regular ringtone. The specific short double pulse that she had learned over 4 years meant Marcus. Emergency. Ronan answered it immediately. He listened for 9 seconds. She counted. His face went through something she could not read. That was rare. After 4 years, his face almost always had some translation she could find. But this whatever Marcus had just told him produced an expression that was new. Not fear, not anger. Something further back than those, in the territory where the oldest responses lived. He lowered the phone. The recording, she said. What about it? He looked at her. It's not just tonight, he said. The camera in this room, Marcus traced the feed. It's not going to a local receiver. He stopped. It's being live streamed. She heard the word and felt it land in layers. To whom? We don't know yet. Multiple endpoints. Whoever Soren invited to watch. She thought about that, about the specific, deliberate cruelty of it, not just recording Ronan's reaction to preserve as evidence, but broadcasting it in real time to an audience assembled to witness his humiliation. Not a trap with one spring, a performance with viewers. How many people are watching right now? She said. Ronan looked at her. Marcus says, the stream has been active for 2 hours, he said. Since before you went to the terrace. Since before the terrace. Since before Talia's hand reached for her gown. Since the moment they walked into this room, someone had been watching, and someone else had been hosting that watching. And the evening from the first glass of champagne to the torn silk, to the note in the jacket pocket, to this exact conversation at the edge of the ballroom, had been, for that audience, a show. Imani looked around the room. The amber light, the string quartet, the careful performance of wealth and connection. All of it unchanged. All of it entirely unaware. Except for them. Can Marcus kill the feed? She said. He can try. But if he does it now, Soren knows we found it. Yes. Which tells him we know more than he thought we did. Which changes his timeline, Ronan said. If he feels exposed, he doesn't wait. He acts. Tonight. Possibly, she processed this. The logical sequence of it. The way each piece connected to the next. The way Soren had something that would tighten, regardless of which direction you pulled. Leave the feed running. Soren gets his footage. Kill the feed. Soren accelerates. Confront him directly. Cameras capture exactly what he wants to capture. Trap with no wrong door. That was what Soren had built. Thought he had. What does Soren look like, she said. Ronan looked at her sharply. Why? Because if he built a trap this elaborate, he's here to watch it in person, she said. He wouldn't leave this to remote viewing. He'd want to be in the room. Ronan was very still. Is he here, Ronan? The pause that followed was 3 seconds long. Exactly 3. The same length as the window on the terrace. The window between understanding and arrival. Yes, Ronan said. He's here. He arrived 20 minutes ago. Marcus spotted him near the service corridor, which is why Marcus came to find you. Yes. And you were going to tell me this when? He didn't answer. Later, she said. Not a question. Just the word, sitting there between them, doing what it always did. She looked across the ballroom. She didn't know what Victor Soren looked like. She didn't know where he was standing, or what he was wearing, or how he held himself in a room. But she knew this. He was here. He was watching. He believed he had built something perfect, something Ronan couldn't escape without destroying himself. And he was in this room right now, watching it unfold with the specific satisfaction of someone who had been very patient and was now, finally, arriving at the moment they had designed. He had not designed for her. That was his mistake. Not because she was Ronan's wife, and not because Ronan's protection extended to her, and not because she had any particular power in the architecture of his world, but because Victor Soren had built his entire plan around the assumption that Imani Crosswell was a vulnerability, a soft point, a lever. He had watched her for weeks. He had photographs of her at her window, in her car, outside her office. He had arranged for 3 people to humiliate her in public. He had orchestrated this entire evening around the premise that she was the thing Ronan could not defend without destroying himself. He had never once considered that she might have something to say about that. "Tell me where he is," Imani said. "Amon me where he is," she said again, and her voice was the same voice she'd used on the terrace, not loud, not shaking, exactly as still as it needed to be, and then, "Get out of my way." Ronan looked at her, and for the first time all evening something crossed his face that was not control or strategy or the managed stillness of a man who had built a wall between himself and everything he couldn't afford to lose. It was something closer to recognition. She watched him decide. "Northeast corner," he said, gray suit. "He's been nursing the same scotch for the last half hour." She turned to look, and across the amber room, through the careful performance of wealth and belonging, at a small table in the northeast corner with a glass of scotch, and the expression of a man watching something he believes is entirely under his control, she found the face of Victor Soren. He hadn't seen her looking yet. He would. She walked toward him. Not fast. Not slow. The same pace she used when she entered a client's space, for the first time measured, deliberate, the pace of someone who had already decided what they thought, and was simply moving toward the moment of saying it. Around her, the ballroom continued its performance. Glasses lifted, heads tilted in laughter, the string quartet working through something melancholy that nobody was listening to. Imani moved through all of it and felt none of it. Victor Soren saw her coming when she was 12 feet away. She knew the moment he registered her, because his glass stopped moving. He'd been lifting the scotch toward his mouth, and it simply stopped, suspended, while his eyes found her face and processed what they were seeing. He was in his early 60s, she guessed. Silver at the temples, the kind of silver that on certain men looked like authority, and on others looked like the slow surrender of the body to time. On Soren, it looked like both simultaneously. His gray suit was expensive in the way that Ronan's suits were expensive, not in the fabric necessarily, but in the way it had been made to accommodate a particular kind of body, a body that had spent decades sitting across tables from people and winning. He had a face that was almost pleasant. That was the thing that struck her first. Not cold, not overtly calculating, almost pleasant. The face of a man who had learned early that warmth was a tool and had been using it as one for so long it had become indistinguishable from the real thing. She stopped in front of his table. He set the scotch down. "Mrs. Veyne," he said, not surprised. "Careful, you know my name," she said. "I know a great deal about you," he said mildly. "The way you might acknowledge having read someone's work. Please." He gestured to the chair across from him. She didn't sit. "You had someone tear my dress tonight," she said. Pause. His expression didn't change exactly. It adjusted the way a lens adjusts focus. "I'm not sure what you mean." "You're sure?" She put both hands on the table and leaned forward, not to be but to be close enough that this conversation could not be overheard. Talia Mercer sat on a charitable board with her ex-husband. Her ex-husband's firm did due diligence work for 2 of your real estate development projects in 2019. That connection took Marcus 40 minutes to find, which means you thought it was buried deep enough. It wasn't. Something moved behind his eyes. Fast. A recalibration. "You've been busy," he said. "I've been talking to my husband." "Ah." He lifted his scotch again. Drank. Set it back down with the care of a man who controlled even his reflexes. "And how is Ronan this evening?" "Restrained," she said, "which I'm certain is disappointing for you." He looked at her for a moment. Then, slowly, he smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the kind of smile that existed to show you where all the teeth were. You're smarter than he gives you credit for, Soren said. Most people are smarter than you give them credit for, she said. You just built your whole plan around the assumption that I wasn't. I built my plan around the assumption that Ronan would behave like Ronan. He tilted his head slightly. The woman is incidental. The word landed in the room between them. Incidental. She absorbed it the way she absorbed most insults, not by pretending it didn't cut, but by deciding what to do with the cut. She'd had 33 years of practice. The scar tissue was load-bearing at this point. Camera feed, she said. The live stream. Kill it. He blinked. The first genuinely involuntary thing he'd done since she walked up. I'm sorry? You heard me. I don't know what you're referring to. Victor. She said his name the way you say a word you've already finished with. The stream has been active for 2 hours. We know the origination point. We know it's multi-endpoint. She held his gaze. We don't know yet who's watching on the other end. But we will. And when we do, whatever you've promised those people, whatever arrangement you have with them, becomes a liability for them and a weapon for us. So you can kill the feed voluntarily, right now, and we can have a different kind of conversation. Or you can wait while Marcus finishes the trace, and then you won't be making any choices at all. Soren was quiet. The string quartet shifted into something else. Somewhere behind Imani, a woman laughed. High and bright and entirely elsewhere. You said we, Soren said. Yes. You're speaking for Ronan. I'm speaking for myself. Ronan's across the room. She paused, watching. Soren's eyes moved past her shoulder. Just for a second. Just long enough to confirm it, which was the tell she'd been waiting for, the confirmation that Ronan's position in this room mattered to him. That the physical arrangement of this confrontation was something he was tracking, which meant he was still managing optics, which meant the live stream was still running, which meant he had not yet decided she was worth taking seriously. You have 2 minutes, she said. After that, Ronan makes his own decisions and I step back. She walked away from the table. She did not look back. She crossed to the nearest waiter, lifted 2 glasses of water from the tray, not champagne, water, because she was done performing, and moved to the side of the room, where a marble column gave her back a wall and a sightline to both Soren and the terrace door simultaneously. Ronan appeared at her shoulder within 30 seconds. What did he say? Ronan's voice was very quiet. Nothing useful. But he flinched when I mentioned the trace. She handed him one of the water glasses. He's still deciding if I matter. You shouldn't have gone over there alone. I know. She drank. I did it anyway. He was quiet for a moment. She could feel the specific tension that came off him when he was suppressing an argument he'd already decided he wasn't going to win. The trace, he said. Marcus is close. 10 minutes, maybe less. Good. When we have the endpoints, I know. She looked at Soren across the room. He had not moved. His scotch was in his hand again, but he was looking in their direction with the expression of a man renegotiating an internal estimate. Whatever's on the other end of that feed, whoever he invited to watch, that's the piece he's actually afraid of. Not you reacting. He can generate footage of you if he needs it. What he can't replace is his audience. Ronan turned to look at her. What do you mean? He live-streamed this, she said. He invited people to watch, which means he made promises to those people, which means this wasn't just a trap for you, it was a performance. He's been selling something, Ronan. And if the performance falls apart, he doesn't just lose tonight. He loses whatever credibility he built the deal on. She watched Ronan process that. He's been telling people he can take me down, Ronan said slowly, more than telling them. He's been demonstrating. This party tonight was the demonstration. The quiet that followed was the kind that came with understanding. Arriving not just in the mind, but in the body, the slight change in posture, the breath that was slightly longer than the one before it. So the audience isn't just watching, Ronan said. They're evaluating. And if the product doesn't deliver, the deal falls apart. His jaw tightened. Victor has been building something. Something large enough that he needs partners, and he's been using the promise of destroying me as the proof that he can deliver. Yes, she said, which means the people watching that stream right now are people who are considering doing business with him, or already have. Ronan set his water glass down on a passing tray without looking at it. He stared across the room at Soren with the expression she had never stopped finding frightening, not because it was violent, but because it was absolutely, completely cold. Kind of cold that preceded a decision that would not be walked back. I need Marcus, he said. I know. Go. She touched his arm just briefly, just the press of 4 fingers. Don't engage Soren directly yet. Not until Marcus has the trace complete. I know how to do this, Imani. I know you do. She held his gaze. I'm just telling you to let the information do the work, not your hands. He looked at her for one moment. Then he moved. She watched him cross the room, the way the crowd unconsciously gave him space, the way Soren tracked his movement while pretending not to, and she exhaled. Her hands were still steady. She was almost surprised. She looked at her phone. No new messages from the unknown number. She pulled up the photograph of herself at the window and looked at it for a moment, trying to read the shot, the angle, the elevation, the light on the glass. The building across from their apartment was a hotel, 12 stories. From the angle and the apparent level of the photographer relative to the window, the shot was taken from approximately the 8th or 9th floor, a hotel room, rented for the purpose. She typed the address of their building into her phone's notes and added, Hotel across, 8th or 9th floor. Check guest registry beginning 3 weeks prior. Then she looked up and found Soren still watching her. He lifted his scotch glass in a small, precise gesture. Not quite a toast, an acknowledgement. The gesture of a man who had revised his assessment of a variable. She held his gaze and did not move. He looked away first. Marcus found Ronan near the corridor at 10:47 p.m. Imani was close enough to see the exchange, but not to hear it. She watched Marcus's face. The controlled urgency of earlier had changed into something else, something tighter. The kind of expression that appeared on people's faces when information had arrived that was worse than anticipated. Ronan listened. His back was to her. She couldn't read him from this angle. Marcus finished speaking. Ronan was still for 4 seconds. 5. Then he turned and looked across the room at her, with an expression she had never seen on his face before. She crossed to them immediately. What? She said. Marcus glanced at Ronan. Ronan nodded once. The trace is complete, Marcus said. His voice was low, and without inflection, the voice of a person delivering information surgically. The live stream has 5 receiving endpoints. 3 are foreign IP addresses proxied. We can't identify the individual yet. 1 is domestic, registered to a shell company. We're still running it. He paused. The 5th endpoint is local. Manhattan. The signal terminates at a device that's currently active in this building. The room seemed to tilt slightly. In this building, Imani said. On this floor, Marcus said. She looked around. The ballroom. The same amber light, the same careful crowd, the same performance she had been moving through all evening. One of the people currently lifting glasses and telling calculated lies and pretending interest in each other's boats and portfolios and renovation projects had a device open to a live stream of this room. One of these people was Soren's inside contact. The device, she said. Can you localize it further? We're working on it, Marcus said. We need 3 more minutes. You don't need 3 more minutes, said a voice behind them. All 3 of them turned. Talia Mercer was standing 6 feet away. She had a glass of wine in her hand that she was not drinking, and she was looking at Imani with an expression that was not the cruelty from the terrace. It was something else, something that looked unexpectedly and almost incomprehensibly like exhaustion. The device is in my bag, she said. The silence lasted approximately 2 seconds. Tamarka started. Don't. She looked at Ronan. I'm not running. I know how this ends if I run. Her voice was even but thin at the edges, the voice of someone who had been holding something tightly for a long time and had just made the decision to set it down. I need to speak to her. She looked at Imani. Just her. 2 minutes. Ronan moved forward. That's not... Ronan. Imani put a hand on his arm. 2 minutes. He looked at her with the expression of a man physically restraining every instinct he possessed. I'll be directly on the other side of that column. I know. He stepped back. Marcus moved to the column. Talia and Imani were effectively alone in the small geography the crowd had unknowingly created around them. Up close, Talia looked different than she had on the terrace. Older, somehow, or more accurately, the age she actually was, instead of the performed age she maintained in public. The careful blonde had an inch of darker growth at the root. There were lines around her eyes that the amber lighting hadn't reached before. She looked like someone who had been doing something she knew was wrong long enough that the wrongness had worn through into her face. I didn't know about the gown, Talia said. I need you to know that. Imani looked at her. I was told to approach you, make you uncomfortable, keep you on the terrace long enough for the cameras to get what they needed. She paused. I reached for you because I got caught up in it. The moment. Preston was laughing and she stopped, breathed. I'm not asking you to forgive me for that. I just need you to know it wasn't scripted. The rest of it was, Imani said. Yes. What exactly was Soren paying you? Talia's mouth compressed. He wasn't. Not money. She looked at the wine glass in her hand, like she was surprised to find it there. My ex-husband, Davis. He's been under investigation for 2 years. Federal level. Victor told me if I helped him tonight, he would make the investigation go away. He told you he had that kind of influence, Imani said. He demonstrated it. 6 months ago, Victor made a witness recant in a case that should have destroyed someone. She stopped. He's done it before. He has people, prosecutors, judges. Not many, but enough. Imani was quiet for a moment. The weight of it settled in differently now. Not just a trap built for Ronan, but a trap built from other people's vulnerabilities. Talia's fear for her ex-husband, Preston and Gavin, who must have had their own leverage points, their own versions of a federal investigation being made to go away. Soren had not recruited cruelty. He had recruited desperation and let the cruelty emerge naturally from it. Why are you telling me this now? Imani asked. Because it didn't work. Talia looked up. Her eyes were dry, which somehow made her seem more honest than tears would have. You didn't. You were supposed to be humiliated. You were supposed to fall apart. The whole thing depended on you giving them footage of you being broken, and you didn't give them anything. She paused, and I watched you stand up in that torn dress and look directly into the camera, and I thought, she stopped again. What did you think? Imani said. I thought, whatever Victor Soren paid me, or threatened me, or promised me it isn't worth being the woman who did that to someone like you. She said it plainly. I know that doesn't fix anything. It doesn't, Imani agreed. No. Talia set the wine glass down on the nearest surface. The device in my bag is keyed to Victor's stream server. I can give it to him. She glanced at the column where Marcus was standing. Or I can do something else with it. What else? Imani said. I can change the credentials, Talia said. Victor still has the stream, but I can revoke his control of the endpoint distribution. Force all 5 feeds through a single relay, and if someone were to intercept that relay... She stopped. Let the implication sit. Imani looked at her carefully. You know how to do that. Davis was a tech lawyer. You spend 10 years married to someone in that world. You learn things. A ghost of something that wasn't quite humor crossed her face. Also, I have a computer science degree that I haven't used since 2003. But apparently, it's like riding a bicycle. Imani was quiet for 3 seconds. Why would you do that? She said. You came here working for Soren. You turn on him. You lose whatever he promised you about Davis. I already lost it, Talia said. I've been sitting here for the last 30 minutes understanding that. Victor Soren doesn't make deals. He makes arrangements that benefit Victor Soren. Davis's investigation goes away when it's useful for Victor that it does, not because I earned it. Her jaw tightened. I was an idiot. You were scared, Imani said. Same thing sometimes. Imani looked at her for a long moment. Then she turned and looked for Ronan, found him on the other side of the column, and made eye contact. She tilted her head toward Talia. He crossed to them. In seconds. Marcus, 2 steps. She can centralize the stream, Imani said. Funnel all 5 feeds through a single relay. Ronan looked at Talia with an expression that was not warm. And then what? Then Marcus intercepts the relay, Imani said. And we have a complete record of everyone watching. Everyone Soren invited to witness tonight's demonstration. She held his gaze. Not just footage of what happened in this room. Footage of who wanted to see it happen. Proof of who is invested in Soren's plan to take you down and willing to watch a live stream to see it succeed. Ronan was very still. That's leverage, he said. That's better than leverage, she said. That's a list. He looked at Talia again. The quality of the look had changed, not warm. Still not warm, but something calculating had entered it that was different from hostility. He was running numbers. How long? He said to Talia. 4 minutes, she said, maybe less. If this is a secondary play. It's not, Talia said flatly. I don't have anywhere left to play to. Ronan looked at Marcus. Do it, he said. They moved to the corridor. Not the main corridor, the narrower one that ran behind the kitchen entrance. The one that smelled faintly of lemon cleaning solution and was lit with the flat, honest fluorescence that the amber ballroom never had to deal with. In here, people looked like what they were. The performance evaporated. Talia opened her bag and removed a small tablet with a cracked corner on the case. Her fingers moved across it quickly, confidently, the computer science degree apparently fully functional on its bicycle. Marcus stood over her shoulder, watching every keystroke. Ronan stood 3 feet back with his arms at his sides, and Imani stood beside him. The 3 foreign IPs, Marcus said, watching the screen. They're resolving. 2 are Eastern European same proxy cluster. The third is what? Ronan said. Seoul, Marcus said. The Korean IP is resolving to Seoul. Ronan said nothing, but she felt him go still beside her in a way that was different from his usual stillness. Deeper. The stillness of a man who has just heard a word in a language he thought he'd forgotten. Who do you know in Seoul? She said quietly. Someone I haven't spoken to in 8 years, he said. Connected to Soren? Not directly. His voice was careful, measured. Connected to the organization Soren came out of. Before he ran legitimate accounts, he paused. Before I brought him in, corridor was very quiet. Talia's fingers had slowed on the tablet. Marcus was looking at Ronan with the expression of someone recalibrating how large this had just become. You brought Soren in, Imani said. 11 years ago. He was highly recommended. By whom? By the person in Seoul. She processed that. The sequence of it, the architecture. 11 years of Soren inside Ronan's organization, inside his finances, inside his personal accounts, inside their life. 11 years that began with a referral from someone in Seoul who was currently watching a live stream of tonight's events from a proxied IP address. It wasn't Soren's plan, she said. Not originally. Ronan's jaw moved. Ronan, she turned to face him. This operation is bigger than Soren. Soren is the instrument. Someone else is the architect. I know, he said. She heard her own voice come out flat. How long have you known? The pause was 4 seconds. The same terrible 4 seconds as always. 6 weeks, he said. She closed her eyes for one moment. One single moment, in the fluorescent corridor, behind the kitchen of a 40-story ballroom, in a torn emerald dress and her husband's jacket, she let herself feel the full weight of it. 6 weeks. The same 6 weeks as the photographs, as the financial irregularities, as all of it. He had known from the beginning that this was larger than Soren. He had known from the beginning that it reached back 8 years and connected to something he had done that he had never told her about, and he had sat on it, managed it, planned to protect her from it. She opened her eyes. The relay is set, Talia said from the floor. She was looking up at them both with the expression of someone who understood they had stumbled into a much larger room than the one they'd agreed to enter. Marcus can intercept on your signal. Give me a minute, Ronan said. Ronan, I said give me a minute, Marcus. Marcus stepped back. Ronan turned to Imani. The fluorescent light did him no favors, and he seemed to know it. He looked older in here, and tired in a way the amber room had hidden, and there was something in his face that she had never seen in 4 years. Something that might have been, in another man, the beginning of an apology that understood it wasn't enough. In 2016, he said, I made an arrangement with a man named Kang Jun-ho. He was running distribution networks through Seoul, moving through Eastern Europe. I needed infrastructure he had. He needed capital I had. We were partners for 18 months. He paused. I ended the partnership. The reasons were legitimate, business-wise. But I ended it in a way that cost him significantly. He lost 2 networks because of how I structured the exit. And he's been waiting, Imani said. Apparently. 8 years, Ronan. I know. He waited 8 years, recruited your own financial partner, built this entire operation. I know. And you have known for 6 weeks that this was about Kang, and you didn't tell me. I didn't have confirmation until 3 days ago. Before that, it was theory. 3 days ago, you had confirmation that a man who had been planning your destruction for 8 years had identified me as the way to do it. 3 days ago, she stopped, breathed, and you took me to a party. I couldn't cancel without signaling. I'm not asking about the logistics. She said it quietly, but with the kind of precision that made quiet worse than shouting. I'm asking why. In 3 days, you could not find one moment to sit across from me and say, Imani, Here is what is happening. Here is the full shape of it. Here is what I know, and here is what I'm afraid of. I'm asking why in 4 years of marriage you have never once looked at me and decided that I could be trusted with the actual truth." He looked at her. He did not deflect. He did not manage. He stood in the fluorescent light and let her words land where they landed. "Because every time something threatened you," he said slowly, "I looked at what I knew about my world and what I knew about the people in it, and I made a calculation. And the calculation was always the same. The less you knew, the less they could take from you, the less you could be used. That calculation is wrong," she said. "I know that now." "You've known it for a while," she said. "You've chosen the calculation anyway." He did not deny it. "I have never been less safe," she said, "than I was tonight in a room full of people who knew everything that was happening while I knew nothing." The words sat in the corridor between them. Marcus was looking at the wall. Talia was looking at the floor. The kitchen on the other side of the door produced sounds of industrial normalcy, the clatter of metal, someone calling an order, the rush of water. Ronan's hands came out of his pockets. He looked at them for a moment, like they belonged to someone he was meeting for the first time. "What do you need from me?" he said. The question surprised her. In 4 years of marriage, it was the first time she had heard it in that exact form. "Not. Let me handle it." "Not. I'll take care of it." "What do you need from me?" She looked at him for a long moment. "Intercept the relay," she said. "Get the list. Bring every piece of evidence Marcus has been sitting on. And then we go find Soren together, and we end this tonight in a way that nobody on that live stream can use, because we're not going to hand them a single frame of footage that looks like what they came here expecting." Ronan held her gaze. "And Kang Junho, Kang comes later. When we have what we need and we're into position to choose the terms." She paused. "But first, Soren, because Soren is in this building, and Kang is in Seoul, and the feed is still running and the relay is set, and we are standing in a service corridor instead of in that room." She looked at Marcus. "Intercept," she said. Marcus moved. The tablet screen shifted. Talia made 2 more keystrokes and stepped back. Marcus's phone connected to a laptop he'd pulled from somewhere she hadn't seen it before, and since 3 seconds, there was just the sound of processing. Then Marcus looked up. "I have them. All 5 endpoints. Complete connection data. One of the Eastern European IPs is registering a physical device address I can cross-reference. The Seoul IP is," he stopped. "Read something on the screen." "Read it again." "The Seoul IP is connected to a verified account. It's not proxied anymore. Either he dropped his guard or he wanted us to see him," Ronan said. "Why would he want that?" Imani said. Ronan looked at her, and before he could answer, all the lights in the ballroom went out. Not a flicker. Not a surge. All of them simultaneously, as if the building itself had decided to stop performing. The amber glow vanished. The corridor fluorescence died. For exactly 3 seconds, the entire 40th floor existed in pure darkness, the only light the glow of Manhattan, coming through the ballroom's tall windows, painting everything in the cold silver of a city that never fully slept. 3 seconds. Then the emergency lighting came on dim, red-tinted, utilitarian, the lighting of exits and evacuation protocols. In the red light, Imani could hear the ballroom already reorganizing itself into key voices, the high-pitched questions of people for whom darkness was novel rather than dangerous. Glass breaking somewhere. Someone's heels as marble moving fast. Marcus was already at the corridor door, pushing it open a crack, looking into the ballroom. "He's gone," Marcus said. Ronan was beside him in 2 strides. "Where? Soren's table empty." "His glass is still there." Marcus scanned. "Preston and Gavin are by the bar. I see Talia." He glanced back. Talia was 2 feet behind him. "Victor Soren has left the room." "Service corridor," Ronan said. "Or the elevator bank." "Emergency lighting means the main elevators are locked to ground floor only. He'd have to take stairs or use a service." "Service stairs," Ronan said. "Corridor behind the kitchen runs directly to the service stairwell." He'd know that. "He knows this hotel." "He planned the exit," Imani said. Both men looked at her. "He cut the power," she said. "Not because he panicked. Because this was always the exit. If the evening went wrong, if the footage wasn't what he needed, if we found the stream he had an exit built in." She looked at Ronan. "He didn't come here to watch. He came here to be able to leave, before we could decide what to do with what we found." "He's been gone 60 seconds, Marcus said. "Maybe 90. Ronan moved toward the service door. Ronan. Imani caught his arm. He turned. The camera, she said. If he cut the power to the room, did he cut the feed? Marcus checked the laptop. His face changed. The feed is still active, he said. It's running on a separate power circuit. Whatever he killed, he didn't kill the stream. Which means everyone watching still has a signal, Imani said. And if Ronan chases Victor Soren through a service corridor in a building where the power is out, and they find each other in the dark. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. The stream was still running. The audience was still watching. And somewhere in the stairwell below them, Victor Soren was descending 39 floors with evidence of a conspiracy on his phone, and the confident assumption that Ronan Veyne would do exactly what Ronan Veyne always did. Come after him. In the red emergency light, Ronan's face was all shadow and hard angles. He was looking at the service door. His hand was on the frame. He wants you in that stairwell, she said. I know. Then don't go. If he walks out of this building tonight with what he has, he walks out of this building with half of what he came here for, she said. We have the relay. We have the connection data. We have 5 endpoints and a list of everyone who was watching. She stepped closer. What does he have? Footage of a party where his plan didn't work. Footage of his 3 hired weapons failing to break me. Footage of a Mafia boss who didn't react the way a Mafia boss was supposed to react. Ronan was very still. He has nothing useful, she said, unless you go into that stairwell. Marcus was looking between them. There is one thing, Marcus said slowly. Both of them looked at him. His face was doing something careful. The face of a man who has been holding a piece of information and deciding whether the moment had arrived. The financial records, he said. The full audit Ronan ordered 6 weeks ago. He paused. Victor knows about it. The corridor was very quiet. How? Ronan said. Because the auditor Ronan used, Marcus said, and his voice had gone very flat now. The voice of bad news arriving at its final address was recommended by Victor's office. Imani heard Ronan's breath change. Just once. Just a single intake that was slightly too sharp to be controlled. And in 4 years of studying that face and that voice, and the body language of a man who had built a life on never being caught off guard, that one breath was the most frightening thing she had heard all evening. The auditor, Ronan said. Works for Soren, Marcus said. Has worked for him for 3 years. We found it 30 minutes ago, which is why I was coming to find you when. He glanced at Imani. When things moved quickly. The audit, Imani said. She was working through it. Ronan ordered an audit of Soren's accounts using an auditor who reports to Soren. Which means Soren knows exactly what Ronan found. Which means the evidence Ronan has been protecting for 6 weeks, Marcus said. Victor Soren already knows about it, and has had 6 weeks to counter it, Imani said. Or destroy it, Marcus said. Or build something to discredit it. She looked at Ronan. He was standing with one hand on the doorframe and one hand at his side, and the expression on his face was the expression she had never seen before tonight, the one she had no translation for. She had it now. It was the expression of a man who had spent decades in a world that required him to be the one who knew more, saw more, planned further ahead, and had just discovered that for 6 weeks, every move he thought he was making in private had been watched, catalogued, and prepared for by the person he was moving against. He had been the one without the complete formation. For 6 weeks, he looked at her. The list from the relay, she said. The connection data Marcus just intercepted. Soren doesn't know we have that. Ronan looked at her. That's what we have that he doesn't, she said. That's the piece he didn't plan for. He planned for the audit. He planned for the footage. He planned for the exit. She held his gaze. He didn't plan for Talia. They both looked at Talia, who was standing against the corridor wall in the red light, looking like someone who had just watched a building come down and was trying to decide if they were still in it. His partners, Imani said. The people watching that stream. The people who invested in Victor's ability to destroy you.
Yeah.
They don't know the stream has been intercepted. They think they're watching a plan that worked. And right now, in the dark, with Soren gone, the footage they're seeing is a ballroom in emergency lighting and a party in confusion. She paused. What they're not seeing is us standing here with their names. She took the tablet from Talia's hands, looked at the screen. 5 endpoints. Connection data. Physical device addresses where Marcus had been able to resolve them. Names beginning to attach themselves to the sole IP names she didn't recognize yet, but that Ronan would. She handed the tablet to Ronan. He looked at the screen. His expression changed once, sharply, when he saw the soul data. Then he controlled it. I know 3 of these people, he said. Soren's partners. 2 of them, yes. The third, he stopped. His jaw tightened. The third is someone who's been sitting across negotiating tables from me for 4 years, presenting himself as a neutral party. A double agent, Imani said. A parasite, Ronan said. And the word came out with a specific bitterness that told her this was a betrayal that had a face attached to it. Someone he had trusted, or close enough to trusted, that the difference hadn't mattered until now. The service door at the end of the corridor opened. Everyone in the corridor went still. The figure who appeared in the doorway was not Victor Soren. It was a man she'd never seen before young, 30 at most, dark jacket, breathing fast from the stairs. He looked at Ronan and said one word. Soren's in the parking structure. Level 2. He's asking for a meeting. The red emergency light buzzed faintly overhead. Ronan looked at Imani. She looked back at him. In the service corridor behind a 40-story ballroom, in the red light of an emergency, with the stream still running and the audience still watching, and Victor Soren 2 floors below them, requesting a meeting that every instinct said was another trap, Imani Crosswell understood that the next decision they made would determine not just tonight. It would determine everything that came after. And for the first time in their marriage, she could see that Ronan understood it, too, that this was not a decision he could make for her, manage for her, or protect her from. This was the place where the architecture of their partnership either held or it didn't, where all the laters and all the managed silences either justified themselves or they didn't. He looked at the young man in the doorway. Tell him, he started. Tell him we'll meet him, Imani said. Ronan looked at her. Together, she said. Tell him we're coming down together. The service stairwell smelled like concrete and old metal, and the particular cold that existed in the spaces buildings kept hidden from the people who used them. Emergency lighting here was a single strip of red along the base of each step functional, inhuman, the kind of light that made everything look like a decision you couldn't take back. Ronan went first. Not because Imani couldn't handle a stairwell, and not because he'd decided to lead. She understood the difference now, had spent 4 years learning it, but because if Soren had put someone in the stairwell, Ronan's body was better positioned to absorb what that someone might do. She was directly behind him. Marcus was 3 steps above them, covering the ascent. Talia had been left in the corridor with instructions not to move, and the look of a woman who had no interest in arguing. 2 flights down, Ronan paused. He held up a fist. The universal language of stop. Right now. No noise. She stopped, pressed herself to the wall, listened. Below footsteps. 1 set. Unhurried. The footsteps of someone waiting, not fleeing. Ronan looked back at her. His face in the red strip light was all bone and shadow. He looked at her eyes, and she looked back, and something passed between them that didn't have words, the specific agreement of 2 people who had decided to trust each other in a place where trust had no safety net. She nodded. They descended. Level 2 of the parking structure was half empty. At this hour, the occupied spaces holding the expensive cars of people 40 floors above them who were currently experiencing an unexpected adventure in emergency lighting. The ceiling was low. Every sound bounced the drip of a pipe somewhere. The distant mechanical cycling of a ventilation system. The precise click of her heels that she could not eliminate, no matter how carefully she moved. Victor Soren was standing between a concrete pillar and a black car she didn't recognize. He'd taken off his jacket at some point. His shirt sleeves were rolled to the elbow, a deliberate signal. She understood, the body language of a man suggesting he had nothing hidden, which meant he definitely had something hidden. He looked at them both and did not look surprised. Expected just Ronan, he said. Adjust, she said. Something moved at the corner of his mouth. You've had quite an evening, Mrs. Veyne. Imani, she said. You've been watching me for 3 weeks. You know my name, Imani. He said it like a concession. Yes. Ronan had stopped 6 feet from Soren and had not moved since. His hands were at his sides. She had been around Ronan Veyne in enough rooms to read the register of his stillness, and what she was reading right now was a man operating on the thinnest wire between decision and action, using in every tool he had to stay on it. You called this meeting, Ronan said. His voice was flat, textured like concrete. Talk. Soren looked at him for a moment. Then he looked at Imani, then back at Ronan. I want to make a proposal, he said. You want to negotiate, Ronan said. From here. From a position of mutual disadvantage, Soren said, which is different. The only disadvantage in this structure is yours, Ronan said. Is it? Soren's hand moved to his breast pocket. Slow, deliberate, not reaching for a weapon, reaching for a phone. He held it up, screen toward them. Do you know what this is? On the screen, a document. She couldn't read it from 6 feet away, but the formatting was recognizable columns, figures, the dense structure of a financial instrument of some kind. That's a transfer authorization, Soren said. Dated 6 weeks ago. Signed with Ronan's digital signature. He paused. Authorizing the movement of $14 million from your primary operating account to an account currently under federal monitoring for money laundering. The parking structure breathed its mechanical breath around them. That signature is forged, Ronan said. Is it? Soren turned the phone back toward himself and looked at the screen with the mild expression of a man checking the weather. The forensic accountant who authenticated it doesn't think so. Neither will the federal prosecutors who receive it tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning, Imani said. Soren looked at her. Unless we reach an arrangement tonight. She felt Ronan's body change beside her. Not a movement, a gathering. The kind of physical change that preceded an action. She put her hand on his arm. Just the back of her hand, barely touching, just enough contact to transmit. Not yet. Kind of arrangement, she said. Soren lowered the phone. Simple. Ronan transfers, controlling interest in the Meridian portfolio to a holding company of my choosing. I withdraw the transfer authorization. The federal matter disappears. And Kang Junho, he paused on the name, watching Ronan's face, is informed that his interests in this particular venture have been satisfied. You want the Meridian portfolio, Ronan said. It's worth approximately $240 million, Soren said. It represents the legitimate core of everything you've built. Without it, the rest of your organization loses its financial spine. He paused. With it, I have everything I need to build what I've been building. And you still have your freedom, your wife, your life. That's not an arrangement, Imani said. That's an amputation. It's a survival offer, Soren said, which is more than you'd get from Kang. Speaking of Kang, she said, I'd like to understand something. Soren looked at her with the expression of a man who had not expected her to be doing this much of the talking. She could see him recalculating, running the estimation of whether engaging her was worth his time or whether she was a distraction. She watched him land on distraction. That was his second mistake of the evening. Kang Junho has been planning this for 8 years, she said. He recruited you, embedded you in Ronan's organization, gave you access to his finances, his accounts, his personal life. And now, 11 years in, the plan is to hand Kang the financial foundation of everything Ronan built. She tilted her head. What does Kang give you for that? Soren was quiet. Because the Meridian portfolio doesn't go to a holding company of your choosing, she said. It goes to Kang. Or it goes to whatever structure Kang operates behind now. And you get what? A percentage? Protection? A seat at a table in Seoul that you've been auditioning for 11 years? Quiet stretched. In it, the ventilation system cycled, and the concrete dripped, and somewhere above them, 40 floors of amber-lit performance continued without them. You're auditioning, she said. That's what tonight was. Not just taking down Ronan, proving to Kang that you could. Soren's jaw moved. You're considerably more informed than expected. No, she said. I'm exactly as informed as I would have been 3 weeks ago if my husband had talked to me. She felt Ronan's arm tighten under her hand. But I'm here now. So let's talk about what you actually have. I just showed you. You showed me a document on a phone screen from 6 feet away, she said. You showed me a number and a date and a signature. That's theater, Victor. You know it and I know it. She took one step forward. The actual question is whether the forged signature holds up to independent forensic analysis. And we both know the answer to that depends entirely on who does the analysis. The analysis has already been done, he said. By the same auditor who reviewed Ronan's files for the last 6 weeks, she said. The one whose firm has been on your payroll for 3 years? Something in Soren's face shifted. There it was. Marcus, she said, without looking away from Soren. Do you want to tell him what we found? Or should I? Marcus's voice came from behind her, from the direction of the stairwell door. The auditing firm. Bellard and Associates. 3 years of payments from a shell company tracing to Soren's secondary LLC. The forensic analyst who authenticated the transfer document is named Carter Price. He has 17 transactions in his personal account from the same shell company across the last 18 months. Soren's hand with the phone dropped to his side. The document doesn't survive independent review, Imani said. Not from anyone who isn't on your payroll. And the moment it goes to federal prosecutors, the sourcing gets scrutinized, which leads to Price, which leads to the payments, which leads to you. She paused. You didn't forge a document to use against Ronan. You forged a document that will be used against you. Parking structure was very quiet. Soren looked at her with an expression she hadn't seen on him yet. Something behind the pleasantness, behind the calculated warmth, behind 11 years of access to a man's life and finances. It was the expression of someone who had been building something for a very long time and had just watched the weight of it shift. You've had what, 30 minutes, he said. Less, she said. But I had a very good starting position. Ronan spoke. Walk away, Victor. Soren looked at him. Walk away from this structure, Ronan said. Get in whatever car you have here. Drive. And we will reach you through proper channels when we're ready. Proper channels, Soren said. I mean lawyers, Ronan said. Courts. Discovery processes. The legitimate mechanisms that you apparently believe I'm too primitive to use. His voice was still flat, still concrete, but there was something underneath it now, not anger, not threat, something more contained and therefore more frightening. You built this plan on the assumption that I would react in the way you expected Ronan Veyne to react. You were wrong. Because of her, Soren said. Because of me, Ronan said. The two men looked at each other across 6 feet of concrete and bad lighting, and the weight of 11 years of access and proximity, and a slow, patient betrayal assembled piece by piece over a decade, sat in the air between them like something physical. Then Soren's phone buzzed. He looked at it. His face did something she couldn't read. Fast and complicated, the face of someone receiving information and processing it on multiple levels simultaneously. Interesting, he said. Put it down, Ronan said. It's from Kang. Soren looked up. He's watching the stream. Has been this whole time. He paused. He says to tell you hello. Ronan's entire body went rigid. He also says. Soren continued, reading from the screen, his voice taking on the specific quality of someone delivering someone else's words with private satisfaction, that the evening has been informative in ways you cannot yet appreciate, and that he looks forward to the continuation. What continuation? Imani said. Soren lowered the phone. Kang's proposal was never just Meridian. Meridian was the entry point, the disruption. He looked at Ronan. What he actually wants is a conversation, a direct one. He could have called, Ronan said. He tried. 8 years ago. When you restructured the soul exit, you left him with 2 choices, accept the losses or retaliate. He chose a third option. Soren paused. He waited until you had something worth taking. Something cold moved through the space between Soren's words. Me, Imani said. Soren looked at her. His expression was almost apologetic. Not quite, but almost. Not specifically. The concept, the vulnerability. He tilted his head. You have to understand, Kang is a particular kind of strategist. He doesn't want what he lost from you in 2016. He doesn't want Meridian for its own sake. He wants to demonstrate to his partners, to his network, to an entire tier of the Asian organized finance world that Ronan Veyne is not untouchable. That's what tonight was, Imani said. The demonstration. This evening. The footage. The live stream. He looked at them both. Everyone watching was invited to witness the moment Ronan Veyne could not protect what mattered most to him. We already have everyone watching, Marcus said, from behind them. Full connection data. Names resolving as we speak. Soren looked past them at Marcus. Something moved through his expression, a brief, involuntary recalculation. You intercepted the relay. Talia, Imani said. Who you underestimated. Much like me. Soren was quiet for 3 seconds. Then he did something unexpected. He almost smiled. Not the teeth-showing smile from upstairs. Something smaller and more genuine, the smile of a person who has been outwitted and is deciding how to wear it. Kang will not be pleased, he said. Good, Imani said. He has resources significantly beyond what's been deployed tonight, Soren said. This isn't finished because you found the relay. I know, Ronan said, but tonight is finished. He looked at Soren with the still, cold, complete attention. And you're finished. You will hand Marcus every device you're carrying. You will remain in this structure until my attorneys arrive. And tomorrow morning you will choose between cooperation and prosecution with the evidence that does not depend on Carter Price or anyone else on your payroll. You're not law enforcement, Soren said. No, Ronan said, but I have a very productive relationship with several people who are. People you've never considered because your entire model of me is a man who doesn't use legitimate systems. He paused. That model is outdated. Soren looked at Imani. Your influence, he said. My choice, Ronan said. Don't give her the credit for my decisions. I'm not giving her credit. I'm giving her responsibility. There's a difference. Soren looked between them. The Ronan Veyne I built this plan for wouldn't be standing here having a legal conversation in a parking structure. That man would have found me in the stairwell, and there would be no conversation. He looked at Imani again. You changed the variable. I didn't change anything, she said. He was already changing. I just stopped letting him do it alone. Soren was quiet. Then, slowly, he reached into his jacket and removed his phone, his wallet, a secondary device, a tablet, small folded, that he placed on the hood of the nearest car. Then he looked at Marcus. Cooperate, he said with conditions. You don't have conditions, Ronan said. Kang, Soren said. I give you everything on Kang. Full documentation. 8 years of communications. Financial architecture. The network he's been building using my access to your accounts. He paused. In exchange for the considerations that I was operating under significant duress, which I was. Duress, Ronan said flatly. Kang has been holding something over me for 6 years. Before I go into a room with prosecutors, I need assurance that the thing he's holding doesn't arrive first. He looked at the concrete floor. I have a daughter. She lives in London. She's not part of this in any way. Kang has photographs of her, surveillance, the same approach he used with. He stopped, glanced at Imani, the same approach. The parking structure breathed. Imani absorbed this, the weight of it, that Soren had been both predator and prey, that the surveillance photographs, the watching, the cataloging of someone's daughter in London, that was the mechanism Kang used to keep his instruments in place. That Victor Soren, who had arranged the humiliation on the terrace, and forged the document and built the trap, was also a man whose daughter's morning coffee had been photographed by someone with a telephoto lens. She did not excuse him. She noted the shape of the thing. Marcus, Ronan said. Call Hargrove. Marcus was already on his phone. Hargrove is your attorney, Imani said. He also has a background in federal cooperation agreements, Ronan said. He'll know what Soren's conditions are worth and what kind of consideration is realistic. Soren looked at Ronan with an expression that was hard to name. You have an attorney who does cooperation agreements. I've been building legitimate infrastructure for 3 years, Victor. You've been inside my organization for 11 of them. You should have noticed. I noticed, Soren said quietly. I thought it was theater. It wasn't theater. I know that now. Ronan looked at him for a long moment. Then, sit down. Don't touch your devices. Marcus will stay with you until Hargrove arrives. He turned to Imani. We need to go back upstairs. The stream, she said. Still running. If we're not visible in that room in the next 10 minutes, Kang's audience starts asking questions about whether the product delivered. And if we go back up there, they see us walk back into the room, he said. Together, undamaged. Ronan Veyne did not lose control in a parking structure, and Imani Veyne is not a woman who stayed home because someone tore her dress. He paused. Let them watch that. She looked at him. Also, he said, there are 3 people upstairs who were involved in what happened on that terrace, and I have some things to say to them. We have things to say to them, she said. Yes. He held her gaze. We. They left Soren sitting on the hood of a car in the red parking light with Marcus standing 6 feet away, and Hargrove already on the phone. Talia was in the stairwell doorway. When they came back through, she'd moved from the corridor, despite instructions, which Imani had expected. Is it done? Talia asked. No, Imani said, but this part is. Talia looked at Ronan with the expression of someone bracing for a verdict. He looked back at her with the expression of a man who had very specific feelings about what she had done on the terrace and was choosing for now to set them aside. Stay available, he said. You'll be contacted. For testimony, Talia said. For everything, he said. They went up the stairs. 2 flights, then the service corridor. Then the kitchen door, which Ronan pushed open with one hand, and they walked through a room full of catering staff who looked up briefly from the organized mechanics of their work, the stacking and washing and wrapping, and then looked back down, because in this city, in this building, on this particular night, 2 people walking through a kitchen, looking like they had just come from a war, was not the strangest thing that had happened. The ballroom was still in emergency lighting when they pushed through the inner door. The crowd had reorganized itself. Some people had gone. Others had gathered near the windows, making the most of the view that didn't need electricity. A hotel manager was in the center of the room, doing the careful dance of someone managing a situation without confirming that there was a situation. The string quartet had stopped playing, though the cellist was sitting with her instrument across her lap, and the particular expression of someone who had been through worse. Imani walked through the room beside Ronan. People looked. Not because they knew what had happened. Most of them didn't, wouldn't, might never. But because Ronan Veyne walked into rooms in a way that commanded attention, and because beside him was a woman in a torn emerald dress, wearing a man's jacket, and carrying herself like someone who had chosen every inch of that presentation deliberately. In the emergency lighting, Imani thought, the amber performance was gone. Everyone looked exactly like what they were. She found Preston Cade near the bar. He was on his second drink since once the lights went out, which she could tell by the way he was holding the glass slightly less carefully than the first. He saw her coming, and his face did something quick and complicated, the face of a man deciding between several bad options. She stopped in front of him. Ronan was 2 steps behind her. He said nothing. He didn't need to. Preston Cade, she said. His full name, the way Ronan had used it on the terrace, because names were specific and specificity was the opposite of dismissal. Your family's property management company. Cade Holdings. 8 residential buildings in the Bronx, 4 in Queens. She watched his face. Rent-controlled tenants who've been receiving violation notices in tripling frequency since 2022. HCR filings that look, from a certain angle, like a systematic attempt to constructive evict a protected class of renters. She paused. From what I understand, the housing attorney who's been sitting on a complaint about Cade Holdings is named Dominguez. She's been waiting for one more piece of documentation. She held his gaze. Funny thing about tonight, I had a lot of time to think about what I know about this city, and who in it deserves to have the full picture. Preston's glass was very still. You came out on that terrace because someone pointed you at me, she said. That's your explanation, I heard it. Now here's mine. I don't care why you did it. What I care about is what happens to the people in those buildings in the Bronx who are going to spend this winter, wondering if their homes are still theirs. She stepped back. Attorney Dominguez gets her documentation this week. What she does with it isn't my business. What you do before she gets it, that's yours. She walked away from him. Gavin Rusk was easier to find. He was near the window, phone in hand, and he lowered the phone when he saw her coming with the reflexive guilt of someone who understood that the object in his hand was also an accusation. She didn't stop walking. She simply spoke as she passed him. Your investor in the Singapore fund. Matthias ran. He doesn't know you've been double reporting the management fees. She didn't look at him. He will by Thursday. She kept walking. Talia Mercer she had already dealt with in a different way, in a different corridor, with a different currency. That one she left. Ronan caught up to her near the center of the room. Dominguez, he said quietly. You actually know her? I designed the waiting room for the legal aid organization she works. For 3 years ago, Imani said. She bought me coffee after, and we talked for 2 hours. She's been fighting those Cade Holdings violations since 2022. The Singapore fund. Kezia's ex-husband is Matthias Ren's wealth manager. She glanced at him. I listen when people talk. Ronan was quiet for a moment. You've been paying attention, he said. I always pay attention, she said. You just never asked what I noticed. He looked at her. She looked back. In the emergency red-tinged light, in the wreckage of the evening, in the room where the performance had finally dropped, and left everyone in their actual faces. Something passed between them that was not comfortable and was not resolved and was not finished. It was something more honest than any of those things. The specific acknowledgement of two people who had been living in the same house and missing each other, and who had arrived through a tearing of silk and a parking structure and a piece of paper with 4 words on it at the place where the missing couldn't continue. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number, the same one. She opened it. A video file. 3 seconds, she pressed play. On the screen, Ronan's face. Not tonight. A year ago, maybe more. She recognized his coat, the gray one he'd donated to a shelter in March. He was in a room she didn't recognize, sitting across a table from a man whose face was partially visible. She could see enough to know it wasn't Soren. She stopped the video, looked at the still frame, the partial profile of the man across the table from Ronan. "Who is this?" she said, and turned the phone toward him. Ronan looked at the screen. His face went very still. The particular deep stillness that she now knew was not calm. "Where did you get that?" he said. "Unknown number. Same one that sent the photograph this morning." She looked at the screen again. "Who is that man?" Ronan took the phone from her hand. He looked at the still frame for a long moment. His jaw moved once. "Ronan. That is Kang Junho," he said. She stared at him. "That's Kang. In a meeting with you. A year ago, yes. You had a meeting with Kang Junho a year ago, and you didn't." She stopped. Breathed. The old reflex of managed calm, because losing it in this room, on camera, was still not an option. "You met with him. Once. He contacted me through a third party. I agreed to the meeting because I wanted to assess. You met with the man who's been orchestrating destruction for 8 years, she said, and you decided to assess rather than tell anyone. I decided to assess rather than start a war, without knowing what I was walking into, he said. That's not the same as hiding it. It is exactly the same as hiding it, she said. In practice, in result, in what it left me with tonight. I know. Stop saying you know. The words came out with more heat than she intended, or exactly as much heat as she intended. She wasn't entirely sure. Knowing is not the same as changing anything. You know, and you do it again. You tow and 6 weeks pass. You know, and you take me to a party where someone tears my dress while the man behind it live streams my humiliation to an audience you knew existed. He didn't defend himself. She had stopped expecting him to, but she was still registering it. The thing about Ronan was that his silences were shaped differently than other men's. Other men's silences were avoidance. His were absorption. He was taking it in. She didn't know yet if taking it in was enough. The video, she said. Kang sent it. Kang or someone working for him. To show you he had it. She looked at the screen again. The frozen frame of Ronan's face across a table from the person who had been dismantling his life with patient, 8-year precision. To show you that the meeting which you kept secret can be used to make it look like you're in partnership with him. Ronan's hand holding her phone tightened slightly. Context strips out easily in footage, she said. A frame of you across a table from Kang Junho. Without explanation. Says partnership. Conspiracy, mutual cooperation. She looked at him. He's been keeping it. Saving it. Because he knew eventually he'd need something that would make you unable to explain yourself. That's the kill switch, Ronan said quietly. The Meridian documents, the forged transfer, the live stream, those were leverage. She said, this is the kill switch. If he releases this footage without the context of why you met him, you look complicit in everything he's been doing, which makes the cooperation agreement with Soren immediately worthless, she said. Because how do you cooperate against someone when there's footage of you meeting with them voluntarily a year ago? She exhaled. He's not just trying to destroy you. He's trying to destroy you in a way where you can't defend yourself, where every move you make to fight back becomes more evidence. Ronan looked at the phone, at the frozen frame. She watched something move through him, not the controlled stillness, something below it. The thing the stillness was built to cover a specific human fear that had nothing to do with prosecution or financial loss or organizational collapse. The fear of being caught doing something that looked like what you were accused of, even when the truth was something else entirely. The meeting, she said. What actually happened in it? He looked at her. I'm asking, she said. I'm asking directly. What did you say to Kang Junho? And what did he say to you? And what was the actual content of the actual conversation? Because whatever your lawyers do with Soren's cooperation agreement, this footage exists, and the only thing that contextualizes it is your account of what happened in that room. He was quiet for 4 seconds. I told him, Ronan said slowly, that I knew what he was building. I told him I had enough on Soren to dismantle it before it started. I told him that whatever he believed he was owed from 2016, the debt had been overpaid by the apparatus he'd assembled around my life. He paused, and I told him that if he continued, I would use every legitimate and illegitimate resource available to me to bring his entire network down, and that the specific cost of it would be personal as well as financial. And he said he'd think about it. Ronan exhaled through his nose. He had no intention of thinking about it. The meeting was his opportunity to see me, to sit across from me, to take my measure. His jaw tightened, and apparently to document that he had. The footage doesn't have audio. There's audio. I haven't received it, which means he may not have it, she said, or he's keeping it for a different moment, or the video quality degrades with audio. Either way, she said. Right now, the only thing we know he has is the visual, your face across the table from his. She looked at the phone, then at him. We need to get ahead of it. There's no getting ahead of it if he releases. There is, she said. If you release it first. The emergency lights hummed. If you release the footage yourself, she said, with your account of the meeting, with documentation of why you attended and what was said, before Kang can shape the narrative, you remove his kill switch. You can't ambush someone who's already walking toward you. Ronan stared at her. You want me to release footage of myself meeting with the man who's been trying to destroy me and frame it as exactly what it was. A man who discovered a threat to his family and went to look the threat in the face. She held his gaze. That's not weakness. That's not complicity. That's a husband who found out someone had been watching his wife and went to tell that person directly what it was going to cost them. She paused. Let people see that. Let Kang's audience see that. The stream was still running. Somewhere above them, in whichever camera Soren's people had installed, the room was still broadcasting to 4 remaining endpoints, the sole IP, the 2 Eastern European proxies, the domestic shell company. All of them still watching. All of them assembled to witness Ronan Veyne's destruction. None of them had witnessed anything of the kind. What they had witnessed was a woman who stood up in a torn dress and refused to give anyone a single frame of damage they could use. A man who went to a parking structure and chose a lawyer over a war. 2 people who had stood in a service corridor and argued genuinely, painfully, without resolution, and come back upstairs anyway. That was what Kang's audience had seen. She thought about what Soren had said in the parking structure. He wants to demonstrate that Ronan Veyne is not untouchable. To his partners, to his network, to an entire tier of people who operated in the shadow architecture of money and power and were deciding whether Ronan Veyne was still a safe bet. She looked around the room. The emergency lighting was starting to feel less red, not warmer exactly, but more familiar. The way the eye adjusted, the way you stopped noticing what you'd been standing in long enough. We need a camera, she said. Ronan looked at her. What? Not Soren's camera, ours. She looked around the room. Someone in this room has a phone with a front camera. Someone has been documenting this evening for their own social media or their own memories, or just the reflexive documentation that people do now when they're in a room that feels important. She found Kezia across the room there, near the windows, face lit by her phone screen, fingers moving. Kezia, she said. Not loud. Just the direction of it, the intention. Kezia looked up. Imani looked at her. Kezia crossed the room. I need your phone, Imani said. Kezia looked at her. Looked at Ronan. Looked at the torn gown visible below his jacket. Made 17 rapid assessments in approximately 2 seconds. What are you doing, Kezia said. Taking back the narrative, Imani said. Kezia handed her the phone without another word. Imani opened the camera. Switched to video. Looked at the screen. Her own face looked back at her. Torn gown visible at the collar of Ronan's jacket. The emerald silk still the most vivid color in the red-tinged room. Her eyes were not the eyes of someone who had been beaten. They were the eyes of someone who had been in a fight and was still standing and knew exactly what she looked like and had chosen to look this way. She turned the camera so it faced out from her hand rather than at herself. She raised it slightly. Let it show the room, the emergency lighting, the Manhattan windows, the crowd of people who were and would remain unaware of exactly what this evening had been. Then she turned it back to herself. She pressed record. "My name is Imani Veyne," she said. "I'm a luxury interior designer. I grew up in Atlanta. Tonight someone tore my dress on a rooftop terrace and photographed it and intended to use it to humiliate me." She paused. "I want to talk about what happened next." The room continued around her. Voices. The ice in the glasses. Ronan standing 2 feet away, watching her, not speaking, not directing, not protecting, just beside her. She kept talking. She talked about the terrace and the silk tearing, and the camera raised in her face. She talked about standing up in the emergency lighting of a parking structure with evidence of a conspiracy in her hand and her husband's secrets in her other hand, and making the decision to not let any of it make her smaller than she already refused to be. She talked about the women buildings in the Bronx and the legal aid waiting room and the attorney named Dominguez. She talked about what it cost to walk into rooms your whole life and be the variable that other people hadn't accounted for, and what it felt like to finally stop managing that cost alone. She did not mention Kang by name. She did not mention Soren by name. She did not give the live stream the specific content it had come here to find, but she gave it everything else. 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Then she stopped recording, handed Kezia's phone back. Kezia was looking at her with an expression that was mostly dry, but working at it. "Post it," Imani said. "Where?" "Everywhere," Imani said. "All of it. Right now." Kezia looked at the screen. Then at Imani. Then she started moving her thumbs. Ronan's hand found the small of Imani's back. Not gripping. Just present. The weight of it. She could feel her pulse in her palms. She was not particularly calm, and she was not performing calm. She was simply moving because stopping was not one of the available options, and had not been for the last 4 hours, and might not be for some time. "Kang just lost the kill switch," she said. "You released the footage of yourself before he could," Ronan said. "We don't have audio of your meeting," she said. "But we have this. And this goes out in 30 seconds to every platform Kezia uses, which is all of them, because Kezia has no relationship with moderation." She looked at him. "By the time Kang's audience checks their phones, the story isn't the one they assembled to watch." Ronan was quiet. "You are not the story," she said. "I am." Something moved through his face. "A black woman in a torn dress," she said, "who got back up and talked for 4 minutes and 30 seconds without asking anyone's permission. That's what Kang's network is watching right now, instead of what they came to see." She held his gaze. "And nobody, not Kang, not his investors, not the people in Seoul or Eastern Europe or wherever the other endpoints are, can use that footage against you. Because it's mine. And I gave it away first." Kezia looked up from her phone. "It's up." Imani exhaled. The emergency lighting above them flickered once, twice, and then, with a sound like a held breath released, the main lights came back on. The amber warmth returned. The ballroom became the ballroom again. Around them, people made sounds of relief and small celebration, the way people do when the ordinary is restored. Something in the room had changed. Ronan turned to look at the northeast corner. Soren's table. The half-finished scotch still there. Then he looked at the camera position Marcus had identified up near the service entrance, small, angled to cover the room. He reached into his pocket and removed his own phone. Dialed a number. "It's Veyne," he said, when it connected. "I need you to reach out to the sole contact we discussed. Tonight," he paused. "No, I'll handle the conversation. I just need the channel open." Another pause. "Because I'm going to call him myself." He lowered the phone. Imani looked at him. "Kang wants a conversation," Ronan said. He's been wanting one for 8 years. He built all of this. He gestured at the room, the evening, the weight of the last 4 hours, because he wanted me to know how long his patience was, what he was capable of. He looked at Imani. "He wants me to respect what he's capable of." And she said, "And I'm going to call him and tell him I do." His jaw was tight. "And then I'm going to tell him what I'm capable of, on his terms or ours." "Ours," he said, "from here, tonight. While his people are still watching a stream that didn't deliver what they expected." He paused. "I don't want him to have the weekend to reframe this." Imani looked at her phone. Kezia's post was already moving. She could see it beginning to travel. The early shares from Kezia's substantial network, the video of Imani in the emergency light, spreading the way things spread when they were real and specific and human in a way that manufactured content never was. It had been 4 minutes since it posted. She looked at Ronan. "Make the call," she said. He looked at her for one more moment. "Stay close," he said. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. He stepped away from her by 3 feet, lifted the phone, dialed. She watched his face as the line connected, watched the specific stillness settle over him, not the managed stillness of suppression, but something different, cleaner. The stillness of someone who knew exactly what they were about to say and had chosen every word. "Junho," he said. His voice was completely level. "It's Ronan Veyne. I think you know why I'm calling." A pause. "Good. Then let's talk about how this ends." The ballroom moved and sparkled around him. The amber light warm on his face, on the gray at his temples, on the hand that held the phone with a grip that was controlled rather than tight. He was not the person who had stepped onto the terrace 40 minutes ago to find his wife in a torn dress. He was not quite the person who had stood in the parking structure either. He was someone between those two people, someone being built in real time out of the raw materials of an evening that had taken everything he thought he knew about who he was and handed it back to him in pieces. She watched him. She did not look away. And across the room, on the small hidden camera near the service entrance that was still streaming to 4 endpoints that included a proxy in Seoul, anyone watching would have seen exactly what Victor Soren had promised them, Ronan Veyne, undone. Just not in the way they had come here expecting. What they saw was a man on the phone, standing in a lit room, beside a woman in a torn emerald dress, who had just handed the entire evening back to them on her own terms. What they saw was the thing that none of them had built a plan to account for. And somewhere in Seoul, watching a live feed that had not delivered a single frame of the destruction it promised, Kang Jun-ho was listening to Ronan Veyne's voice on a phone line that Ronan had chosen to open, and understanding, for the first time in 8 years of patient engineering, that the variable he had failed to account for was not a weakness in Ronan's world. She was the architecture. The call lasted 11 minutes. Imani knew this because she counted. Not obsessively. She wasn't standing there with her eyes on a clock, but the way you count things when your body is too alert to do anything else. When every nerve is still tuned to a frequency that hasn't been turned off yet, and the only thing keeping you from feeling the full weight of the last 4 hours is the forward motion of the next 11 minutes. Ronan stood 3 feet from her and spoke to Kang Jun-ho in a voice she had never heard him use before. Not the concrete flatness of the parking structure. Not the controlled social register of the ballroom. Something stripped of both direct and specific and tired, in a way that sounded like the truth which she was beginning to understand was the most dangerous thing Ronan Veyne could offer anyone. She couldn't hear Kang's side. She didn't need to. She could read the conversation in the way Ronan's jaw moved, in the single moment when he closed his eyes for 2 seconds and breathed through his nose before responding, in the way his free hand pressed flat against his thigh, not a fist. Just pressure, the body finding a place to put what the voice couldn't carry. When it ended, he lowered the phone and stood with it at his side. "Well," she said. "He wants 30 days, Ronanson said. "For what?" "To restructure." Ronan looked at the floor, then back at her. "The network he built using my accounts, the access Soren gave him, he wants 30 days to dismantle it cleanly before I move forward with the federal cooperation through Hargrove. And in exchange, he pulls the video, all copies. People stand down, a pause, and he sends documentation of every transaction he ran through my organization. Everything. Dates, amounts, intermediaries. Enough to close the investigation that's been sitting on Soren's accounts for 2 years and reframe it entirely. He's giving you the weapon to use against himself," she said. "He's giving me the weapon I would have found eventually anyway," Ronan said. "He's choosing the terms of his own exit rather than having them chosen for him." His jaw tightened. Kang is a strategist. He built 8 years of this. He's not going to let it end in a way where he looks like he was beaten. He's going to make it look like he decided to leave. Can you live with that? Ronan looked at her. Can you live with him walking away with the appearance of control? She said. After everything tonight, after the photographs, after the terrace, after all of it, he was quiet for a moment. A long one. I can live with him walking away. he said finally. I can't live with another 8 years of him waiting. He exhaled. If his network is dismantled and the documentation is in Hargrove's hands, the apparatus is gone. Whatever he tells himself about how it ended, he can have that. She looked at him. 30 days, she said, with specific deliverables at 10-day intervals. Hargrove's conditions, not mine. He paused. If any interval fails, the federal cooperation agreement moves forward immediately, and the 30-day arrangement is void. He agreed to that. He didn't love it, but he agreed. Yes. She nodded once. The room around them had settled into the ordinary sounds of a party winding down, coats being retrieved, the string quartet packing their instruments, conversations finishing themselves. The emergency had passed. The amber light was warm and entirely ignorant of what had been decided within it. Victor Soren, she said. Hargrove's with him now. In the parking structure. Ronan's mouth compressed. His daughter in London, I'll have someone pull the surveillance that Kang had on her. She doesn't need to know it existed, but it needs to be gone. That's more than he deserves, she said. It's what I'd want if it were you, he said. He absorbed that. Preston. Gavin, she said. They'll hear from attorneys before the week is out. Dominguez will have what she needs by Wednesday. He looked at her. The Singapore Fund information. I'll reach out to Kezia's ex-husband directly, she said. He deserves to know before it becomes a formal process. Ronan nodded. The last thing sat between them. The thing that wasn't Kang or Soren or Preston or the Bronx buildings or the forged documents or the stream or any of the architecture of the evening. The thing that was just the two of them in the amber light with the particular exhaustion of people who had been through something real and were now standing on the other side of it, without a script. I need to ask you something, she said. All right. The meeting with Kang. A year ago, she held his gaze. Were there other things that year that you didn't tell me about? Not this specifically. Just were there other decisions, other laters. He looked at her without flinching. She appreciated that. She had been with men who flinched at the question, which told her everything they wouldn't say out loud. Yes, he said. How many? He thought about it. More than I can account for right now. Some of them felt like protection at the time. Some of them, he stopped. Some of them, I know were wrong while I was making them, and made them anyway, because the alternative required me to let you into a part of my life that I have spent 20 years keeping separate from everything I didn't want contaminated by it. I'm your wife, she said. I'm not a clean thing you're protecting from contamination. I'm in it. I've been in it. I know that now, he said. You have to stop saying that, she said. Not because it isn't true, but because knowing and changing are different things, and I need to understand which one you're offering me. He was quiet. Ronan. She said his name with everything in it. 4 years, the good weight and the bad weight, the forehead kiss that morning, and the word later, and the parking structure, and the emerald dress, and the 11 minutes on the phone, and all of it. I am not asking you to become someone else. I am asking you to let me stand next to the person you already are. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, I don't know how to do that yet. It was the most honest thing he had ever said to her. She was almost certain of it. I know, she said. Neither do I. We figure it out. He reached up and adjusted the collar of his jacket around her shoulders. The same gesture as the terrace, but different now, not covering her, not shielding her, making sure she was warm. We should go home, he said. Yes, she said. They left without ceremony. Kezia found Imani near the elevator bank and held both her hands for one silent moment that said everything the evening hadn't made space for. She would call tomorrow. Imani would answer. Whatever needed to be said between them would find its time. Marcus had arranged a car. Not the car they'd arrived in, that one was in the garage, too close to where Soren was currently sitting with Hargrove, discussing the terms of whatever remained of his future. A different car, black, anonymous, waiting at the service entrance on the street level. They rode without talking. Manhattan moved past the windows. The city at this hour was past its best performance and into something more honest, the people who worked nights. Walking in and out of light, the restaurants shutting down their kitchens, the particular quiet of a city that never stopped but sometimes slowed enough that you could hear your own thoughts in it. Imani held the torn gown closed over her knees with one hand. With the other she held her phone. Not looking at it, just the weight of it. Kezia's post was somewhere out there now. moving through the city's digital architecture the way water moved through a system it had been built to carry. She didn't check the numbers. The numbers weren't the point. The point was that it existed, that it was hers, that she had given it before it could be taken. Beside her, Ronan was looking out his window. She studied his profile. The gray at his temples that had been there when she met him, and had expanded since, the way time does its work on people who carry a lot of weight. The line of his jaw, the specific way he held his mouth when he was thinking through something he hadn't finished with yet. She had loved that face for 4 years. She expected to continue loving it. She also expected it to continue costing her things, because that was what it meant to be close to someone who was still in the process of becoming who they needed to be. She was still in that process, too. She was not under the impression that the evening had finished her. Croswell Foundation, she said. He turned from the window. I've been sitting on the application for 6 months, she said. The nonprofit structure, the scholarship framework. I kept telling myself I needed more time, more capital, more. She stopped. Kept telling myself later. He looked at her. I'm going to Atlanta next month, she said. I'm going to open it. He was quiet for a moment. I know you've been working on it. Did you know I was stalling? Yes. You didn't say anything. It wasn't my call to make, he said. That one was yours. She considered that. The specific calibration of it, the things he held back from her, versus the things he had correctly identified as hers to decide. It was not a clean line. It was not going to be a clean line. But it was a distinction he was capable of making, which meant they had something to work with. I want you to come, she said, to Atlanta, for the opening. I'll be there, he said. Not in front of me, she said. Not running security or managing the event. I want you there the way a person shows up for someone, sitting in a chair, watching. He almost smiled. The rare version, not the controlled social expression, but the one that showed up unexpectedly at the corners and didn't know it was there. I can do that. I know you can, she said. I'm asking to see it. The apartment was exactly as they'd left it that morning. The coffee cup she'd rinsed and left in the drying rack. His coat on the chair near the door, the gray one she'd recognized in the video Kang had sent. The particular order of a space that two people had built around each other over 4 years. Her books stacked horizontally on the third shelf, because it drove him slightly insane. His running shoes by the door, in a way that drove her equally insane. The shared geography of small irritations and comforts that constituted an actual life. She set her keys on the table and reached up to slide his jacket off her shoulders. She started to fold it, and he took it from her hands, gently, and set it aside himself. She looked down at the torn gown, at what remained of Donna's work still, despite everything, a remarkable dress. The emerald still caught the apartment light. The damage was visible, but not catastrophic. The back's seam, the panel that had given way. Fixable, if you knew what you were doing. She reached back and unzipped it and stepped out of it and stood in the middle of her living room in her slip and bare feet on the hardwood floor and felt the full weight of the evening arrive all at once the way it had been waiting to. Not grief. Not exactly. Something adjacent, the specific exhaustion of a person who has held a shape for too long and has finally, privately, allowed the shape to release. She sat down on the floor. Not dramatically. She just sat down, the way you do when your legs have made a decision before your mind has, and put her back against the couch and her knees up and her hands in her lap. Ronan came and sat beside her, on the floor, without being asked. He loosened his tie and set it on the coffee table and sat with his back against the couch and his shoulder against hers. They sat there for a while. Outside, Manhattan continued. A siren somewhere, moving away. The particular white noise of a city that held 10 million people and their 10 million private reckonings in its concrete grid and kept moving regardless. Tell me something you've never told me, she said. Not an accusation, just a request. He thought about it. When I first saw you, he said, at the Meridian opening. Before you saw me, you've told me about that night. I've told you the version I presented, he said, not the actual thing. He paused. I watched you for 15 minutes before you turned around. You were talking to someone about their wall color. You were annoyed with their choice and you were doing the thing you do where you're being diplomatic about it, but anyone paying attention could see you were annoyed. He looked at the floor. I thought I need to know a person who is that honest about walls. She looked at him. That's what I thought, he said. Not anything strategic. Not anything calculated. He paused. Just that. She was quiet for a moment. I knew who you were before that night, she said. He turned to look at her. Kezia told me. Before I agreed to the introduction, she held his gaze. I did some research. I knew the outline of what you were. She paused. I went anyway. Why? Because the outline of what someone is, she said, is never the whole person. And I decided I wanted to see the whole person before I decided. And when you saw it, I'm still seeing it, she said. That's the point. You don't see the whole person at the opening of an event or in the first year of a marriage. You see them in parking structures and service corridors and in the back of a car at 2 a.m. after someone tried to use them to destroy you. She held his gaze. I'm still here. That's my answer. He looked at her for a long moment, long enough that she could see him deciding whether to say the thing and then deciding to say it. I'm sorry, he said, for the photographs, for the 6 weeks, for building a structure around your life that you didn't agree to. He paused. For making you the last to know about things that were happening to you. The words were plain. No performance in them. No construction. I know, she said. He almost smiled again. I'm allowed to say it, she said. Fair, he said. 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday afternoon, Imani walked into Donna's shop in Harlem with the torn emerald gown over one arm and set it on the cutting table. Donna looked at it, looked at Imani, looked back at it. I heard about your night, Donna said. Which version? The video version, Donna said. My granddaughter showed me. She cried. A pause. I cried. But I wasn't going to tell you that. I'm glad you told me. Donna picked up the torn panel and examined it the way a doctor examined a wound with clinical affection. The sadness of someone who has invested care in something and watched it get hurt. Fixable, Donna said. I know, Imani said. You want it fixed? Imani thought about it. The question underneath the question, whether she wanted the evidence of that night erased or incorporated, whether the torn silk was a damage to be corrected or a record to be kept. Yes, she said, but leave it slightly visible. The seam. I want it to look like it was mended, not like it was replaced. Donna looked at her. Kintsugi, Donna said. Japanese thing. They fill broken pottery with gold so the break is visible. Something like that, Imani said. Donna set the gown down and smoothed the fabric with both hands. Give me a week. The Crosswell Creative Foundation opened on the second Saturday of the following month in a refurbished building in the Old Fourth Ward neighborhood of Atlanta, 3 blocks from the apartment where Imani had grown up. The building had been an insurance office, then a church, then nothing for 6 years, and she had spent 2 months and most of her personal capital transforming it into something that looked like the future she would have wanted access to at 22. The waiting room had good chairs. She was particular about that. Rooms where people waited to hear whether they had been given a chance should have chairs that treated them like the chance was already theirs. She spoke for 12 minutes. She talked about her mother, who had worked 2 jobs so that Imani could take 1 design class at a community center on Saturday mornings. She talked about the Saturday morning teacher who had told her she had a genuine eye and had meant it as a simple observation and had no idea it would become the structural load-bearing wall of an entire life. She talked about the rooms that hadn't wanted her and the things she had built inside them anyway. She did not talk about the party in Manhattan. That story had already traveled on its own. It was in the room whether she mentioned it or not. She talked about the 12 young designers who would receive the first year of foundation scholarships, and she said each of their names out loud, individually, the way she had wanted someone to say her name in rooms where she had been invisible. When she finished, she stepped off the low platform they'd built at the front of the room and walked directly to her mother, who was in the second row and had been gripping her own program since the beginning, and hugged her for a long time. In the back of the room, Ronan Veyne sat in one of the good chairs and watched. Not in front of her, not managing anything, not with his phone out, or his security chief at his shoulder, or any of the apparatus that usually traveled with him. Just a man in a room watching the person he loved do something that had nothing to do with him, do something and everything to do with who she was without him. He did not speak during the reception. He ate one of the small sandwiches that had been arranged on a table near the window and drank a cup of coffee and watched Imani move through the room through her mother and Donna, who had come down from New York, and Kezia, who had flown in the night before. and the 12 scholarship recipients who were learning this afternoon what it felt like to be in a room where someone had specifically arranged things for them. When the room was emptying and the caterers were beginning the quiet work of restoration, Imani found him by the window. "You ate a sandwich," she said. "3," he said. "The one with the cucumber was very good. I'll tell the caterer." He looked at her, at the room, the thing she had built. "You did something today," he said. "I've been doing it for months," she said. "Today was just the part with witnesses. Still," he paused. "I watched those 12 kids' faces when you said their names." "Don't," she said. "You'll start me." "Already started," he said, not looking at her. She looked at him. At the side of his face in the afternoon Atlanta light, which was different from New York light, warmer and more insistent, the light of a city that hadn't decided yet to be sophisticated about itself. It suited him. She thought she might tell him that later. 3 months after that, Victor Soren reached a cooperation agreement that resulted in the closure of a federal investigation and the permanent dissolution of Bellard and Associates. Carter Price, the auditor, lost his license. The details were handled by attorneys and documented in ways that Imani read thoroughly and completely, because she had decided that the days of being the last to know were finished. Kang Junho delivered the final documentation package on the 28th day of the 30-day agreement, 2 days early, which Hargrove noted with professional neutrality. The network that had been assembled around Ronan's accounts was documented, dismantled, and submitted to relevant federal authorities in a process that took several more months and involved names that would eventually appear in financial news publications without any mention of the 40-story rooftop where the whole thing had broken open. Talia Mercer testified in 2 proceedings. Davis Mercer's federal investigation was closed, not because of Soren's influence, which had evaporated along with his organization, but because the case itself, under independent review, turned out to be weaker than the prosecutor's confidence in it had suggested. Talia sent Imani a card that said 3 sentences. Imani read it once, kept it in the same drawer as the Donna-repaired gown, which she had worn twice more by then, the mended seam visible and golden-threaded exactly as requested. Preston Cade's rent-stabilized tenants received a settlement in the spring. Gavin Rusk and Matthias Wren reached a financial resolution that was described in a press release as a mutual restructuring and described privately by everyone involved as exactly what it was. None of it felt like victory. That was the thing she had tried to explain to Kezia once, over coffee in Harlem on an ordinary Wednesday. The resolution of everything didn't feel like winning. It felt like the specific relief of a bone setting after a break pain followed by the beginning of something that would take time to become strength again. "You thought it would feel better," Kezia said. "I thought it would feel like something," Imani said. "It mostly feels like Tuesday." "Tuesday is good," Kezia said. "Tuesday means you're still here making plans." She was still here making plans. On a morning in late winter, Imani stood at the window of their apartment in her bathrobe and drank her coffee. Manhattan below was doing what it always did. The cabs, the cyclists, the particular organized chaos of a city that moved too fast to be sentimental about anything. She thought, briefly, about the photograph. Her own face captured from across the street, cataloged by someone who needed her to be a vulnerability. She thought about it the way you thought about a scar, not with the pain of the original injury, but with a kind of flat recognition. It happened. It healed the way it healed. Ronan came up behind her. He didn't announce himself. She heard him. The particular frequency of his presence that she had been tuned to for 4 years. He stood beside her at the window with his own coffee. They looked at the city together. "The Soul Contact," she said. "Closed," he said, "as of last week. The Meridian portfolio. Restructured. Cleaner than it was before, if I'm honest." She nodded. "The legitimate infrastructure," she said. "The thing you've been building for 3 years. How much of it is actually functional now?" He was quiet for a moment. "More than it was. Enough to retire the other part?" A longer silence. "Not yet," he said, "but more than it was." She looked at the city. "I'm going to need more than it was," she said. "Eventually." "I know," he said. She turned to look at him. He was looking at the city, not at her. The morning light on his face, the gray at his temples, the coffee cup in his hand. Particular ordinariness of a man standing in his own kitchen being seen. Eventually she said, "Not today." "No," he said. "Not today." She looked back out the window. Below, a woman on a bicycle navigated through a gap in traffic with the confidence of someone who had done it 1,000 times. A man outside a corner store was arguing on his phone with the specific body language of someone who was going to call right back the moment he hung up. A yellow cab made a turn that was technically legal and spiritually aggressive. The city entirely uninterested in any of them. She finished her coffee. She set the cup down on the window ledge and reached out and took Ronan's hand. Not urgently. Just the fact of it, his hand. Her hand, the morning light, the city doing what it always did. His fingers closed around hers. There were no enemies waiting today. Not in this room. Not at this window. Not in this exact 10 minutes of an ordinary Tuesday in late winter, with the coffee going cold on the ledge, and the city moving below, and the emerald dress in the closet with its golden seam, and the foundation in Atlanta, placing its second round of scholarship applications, and the 12 names. She had said out loud in a room full of good chairs. She was not smaller than she had been the night someone grabbed her dress and tried to make her ask Isaac permission to exist. She was not larger either. She was exactly who she had been, who she had always been, standing at a window in her bathrobe, looking at a city that didn't particularly care about her survival, which was fine. She had never needed the city's permission. She had never needed anyone's. She took her hand back after a moment, picked up her empty cup, turned away from the window. There was work to do. There was always work to do. She went to do it. Fade out.